And you cannot say that the banks that open an account same day are actually taking more risk. Probably not, but they're using better technologies. So that's an important point. On the retail aspect, I go back to retail. There's always a distinction between institutional and retail from a banking and finance perspective. On the retail aspect, what's also interesting we started seeing is the decoupling of the customer experience from the banking, back office or the banking, the databases specifically. The banks so far, or most of them, have been monopolizing the customer data and the customer information. This is, if you need this information, you come to me and I connect only with you. There are intermediaries that are coming into this space. And these intermediaries, and the banks will have to open up to those intermediaries who will offer better technology, better customer experience for the retail, who no longer only wants to see their account balance online. They want to do a lot more online. They want to do a lot more on mobile. And the banks will have to open up to enable that intermediary and give a better customer experience. So that's in a nutshell, better risk technologies for the banks to open up into the risk and enable the risk and open up into the SME space, and opening the bank technology, open platform, basically to go into the retail space.
Maybe, Amira, on sort of like on a policy side, maybe from your point of view and your perspective with the work that you've done in Jordan, what would you think? Is there any added elements? So we've talked about risk and we've talked about opening the platforms to become more inclusive. From your perspective.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I actually want to kind of reiterate what Samir said about working smarter. And one of the ways that the bank should do it is by thinking a little bit kind of less traditionally. Instead of using collateral and guarantees as the only form of lending, actually using cash flow-based decisions, and that does definitely imply more risk. But if they actually know, or develop the capabilities to manage that risk, it would go a very, very long way in terms of giving access to the SMEs and to the cash-based businesses that most of our countries in this region uses. In terms of policy making, I do see a huge push in the region for kind of more inclusive finance, and a lot of them are actually creating policies that are and regulations that are supporting the MFIs, for example, which are expanding in the region, but also regulating the peer-to-peer lending and the crowdfunding models that are focused on SMEs. Developing bankruptcy laws, solvency laws. These are very, very important things to have to lessen the risk of serving that segment of the market. And I don't really talk about the unbanked only. I talk about the underserved. So there are a lot of people with bank accounts that are not active. They're not really using them much. So that actually also is a problem, because we can't lend them without being able to see their cash flows. So focusing on each segment and understanding each segment separately, because they're very different, and making sure that the regulations and the policies are suitable for that segment. So you can't, for example, make an MFI law and assume that it's going to work for the entire business model space that we have.
Amira, maybe we can turn to the regulator's perspective. So being at the central bank for over 12 years in licensing and actually establishing an innovative unit within a more traditional type of institution, what do you see coming soon, or what do you think are elements that need to be put in place?
Arij, before starting, I want to say that the Central Bank of Bahrain is very proactive in encouraging innovation, beneficial innovation, in the financial services industry. We do a lot of research. We consult widely in order to put in place the appropriate policy and regulatory framework in order to encourage fintech startups to come to Bahrain, as well as to encourage the incumbents to adopt innovative solutions and to move away from their traditional infrastructure. For example, some of the major regulations that we have announced last year, for example, we announced around 3 regulations in the area of fintech. We've announced regulations for the regulatory sandbox, which enables fintech startups both in Bahrain as well as international, as well as existing licensees in Bahrain, to test out their innovative solutions directly with volunteer customers in a very controlled environment subject to very light touch regulations. Of course, there are some regulations that are non-negotiable, such as when it comes to CFT, AML, and consumer protection. However, in general, the other regulations are very light touch. The central bank has also last year announced regulations for crowdfunding, and they cater to both equity as well as finance-based crowdfunding, and accommodates for both conventional as well as Sharia-compliant crowdfunding transactions. Through the crowdfunding transaction regulation, SMEs both in Bahrain as well as foreign SMEs have the chance to get access to funding directly through crowdfunding platforms licensed in Bahrain. And that is a great example of enabling financial inclusion to these SMEs and startups. Last year, we also amended our regulations to enable financial institutions in Bahrain to start using cloud computing services on an outsourced basis, subject to certain restrictions in place. Back in 2004, we also introduced two new license categories, which are the payment service provider and card processing licenses, enabling more innovation and competition in the payment services, and to allow more specialized institutions to come and play in this sector, in this area. Currently, through our dedicated fintech units, we are undertaking further research to come up with further initiatives and to lay down the necessary regulations in place to further accelerate the growth of fintech and to place Bahrain as a leading smart financial center in the region.
About the progress, especially on a sandbox level, and to see a lot of companies coming through that, because that in itself is I think a great learning experience for the regulator and for the entire space. If I turn to Khalid maybe and to basically understand in your role within Bahrain FinTech Bay and how that kind of I see maybe in my perspective as an element within the future of finance. Maybe you can tell us what you see your role playing within the future.
Absolutely. I think, if I look back at the most important thing that has to happen for the future of finance, if you want to call it to materialize, it's awareness and education. And I say that very importantly because innovation or fintech means something to someone. And I'll give very live examples of why this is the case. And I'll come as to why FinTech Bay has been initiated and why this is absolutely at the heart of everything we do. I remember a few instances while going through the exercise of FinTech Bay of talking to many different stakeholders. Everybody has a very different impression of what FinTech is, what does it mean for them, whether institutionally or whether individually. So we have to collectively work together to reach that unified definition of what does FinTech mean to everybody, and then more or less they all have the same thing. I think at an individual level, there is one example or a couple of examples that I think are very striking as to why education and awareness are important. I remember a few months back, 7 ladies from the University of Bahrain did visit me, and they were asking about FinTech Pay. And I asked them, what do you actually do? And they explained accounting, finance, marketing, and they were close to graduation. And I'm like, tell me more about what do you know about FinTech? And then I did realize that the future of finance has to really start at the grassroots level, bottom up, and then top to bottom. And the other example, which I think we got to dispel, is Khalid, you guys are promoting FinTech, regulator, these institutions. Are you trying to replace humans with robots or lose jobs? And my answer to that, and I think with FinTech Bay we want it to be a catalyst, is think of it this way. And I always say this, especially here in Bahrain. Financial services is the second largest contributor to GDP. That's 16.5%. We have a fantastic opportunity to repivot, refresh, and move to the digital and knowledge age. Now, the disruption is here. It's not coming, it's already happening, and it's only going to increase. Are you ready for that disruption or not? And if you're not ready, then if you're worried about losing jobs, you're going to be losing much more than jobs. So you always have to continuously upscale. Now that ties me in as to why we want to do FinTech Bay. So we're doing a lot of the great work with the regulator in terms of the ecosystem. How can we meaningfully build a neutral platform, which means something to everybody, whether it's for corporates, whether it's for individuals, whether it's for startups, scale-ups, you name it. And so the model that we took for FinTech is we said, you know what, how can we push ahead in a sustainable, value-adding, competitive way? So the government could be supporting this initiative individually, but what does it really mean for corporates, and is it really sustainable in a year or 2 years? So we said we're going to flip it. We want this to be a true public-private partnership, where if we wanted to really send a strong statement that Bahrain is very serious to collectively push forward, this is the model that we adopt. So with FinTech Bay, we have well over 30 partners that are financially, I always say, technically, logistically supporting this. So it's not just the government that is trying to push. This also means something to individual institutions that want to figure out where are they in the FinTech innovation journey, how can they be supported, how can they be supported by the ecosystem, by players outside, but also, more importantly, how can they contribute back to the ecosystem? And so the regulatory sandbox has been an absolute game changer for Bahrain. It's encouraged a lot of people to come here, and then how can we help them grow? But also what we want FinTech Bay to be is that industry sandbox where people that normally wouldn't talk to each other are now starting to talk to each other. So for us, where there's a physical element to it, from which it's the first dedicated FinTech co-working space, the largest in the region, but more importantly, it's not just a space, it's not a desk, it's not just a meeting point, there is a whole ecosystem that's already set up on top of it. And the exciting part about this ecosystem is we're only starting. We have well over 30 partners, and this is just the beginning. And so with FinTech Bay, we want to help corporate incubation, venture acceleration, promote education, and the promise that we tell FinTech startups and others, and this is not just a FinTech Bay promise, this is a Bahrain promise. We could tell you to come here, great human capital, connectivity, all of that is true. But what we're going to do is also as an extra commitment, and this is for Bahrain, is come here, we will plug you into the ecosystem, you know what you do, we know what the industry needs, we're going to match you up, and then here are all of the other reasons of why Bahrain is great. But then FinTech Bay is not just for Bahrain, we want it to be for the region, and it's inclusive for everybody and the wider remit. So that's, I think, at the heart of it, what we really want to achieve out of FinTech Bay.
If I turn to Salman and actually talk about how, with Thomson Reuters and your outreach to the Mena region and also rolling out different solutions, so you're not just, a news provider. How do you see the role of startups working with larger institutions or with institutions like yourselves to actually bring to life some of these new financial sort of innovative solutions? How do you see them working together?
It's actually something we have started a while ago. It's nothing really new for Thomson Reuters per se, and that depends on the architecture that you're promoting as part of or using as part of your services, is to have an open platform. So our philosophy has always been an open platform that you can connect to any provider. Obviously, unfortunately, historically, it's been limited to the major financial software providers. So we've worked with the bigger ones. There was the smaller, financial technology providers were almost non-existent. That's obviously changing. We are also taking part in enabling that change. We have created our own lab open lab in Dubai for those to come in and share or be able to leverage that data. But again, there are two areas that we are trying to promote, or we're trying to help grow. One is in the financial market data space that the fintechs would need, and the other one is in the regulatory space, which we also are a content provider of, in the RegTech, I guess, space. And these two, as I said earlier, need to go hand in hand, because the challenges that the markets face are in those two areas primarily. not only, but primarily in those 2 areas. And that's where we see we can add value.
When you said that you have a lab, you try to inspire or promote innovation. So what is your role there? Is it just, and I always, and I'm going to try to play devil's advocate here, but there's a lot of different, institutions that set up spaces and, say, this is what we have, and we have a space here for people to come and innovate. And then what we want to see is what are the actual solid solutions that come out of it? As your role as a financial, type of institution, what do you actually do? Is it just a space and, count it as part of your CSR? How can it actually be functionally, productive to have these kind of spaces attached to corporates?
Sure. I guess, when you're developing in fintech, some of it can be developed as, from a technology perspective only, but most of it really requires the combination of technology and content. So the unique thing we're providing in our lab is the content that we have, right? And that's not available widely. This is restricted to a few players in the world, really, who have this kind of content, whether on regulatory space or whether on the financial market data space. So these are the 2 things unique to our lab, if you want. But obviously, as I said, this is just picking up, right? There is a number of fintechs in the region, which is great. I think we would like to see a lot more, and I think we'd like to see a lot more innovation coming out of the region. We've seen innovation from very small companies in Europe who over the years has become bigger and stronger and more prominent. We definitely would like to see more of that in the region. And I have to mention there are some in the region that have made it to a certain extent, but we'd like to see definitely more of that, and we're happy to help wherever we can.
If I turn to Amira and maybe speak a little bit about, you mentioned making sure that we get people to actually use their accounts and providing these kind of services. But I think a lot of us maybe that come from maybe larger institutions, and when we talk about collateral and all of these things, so with all of this new technology coming into play, when we talk about the balance between innovation and security, what are your views, coming from, you worked in the private sector, now in the public sector. How, and then I'll turn to Yasmin to see what the regulator is doing on that end. But what do you see is something that's very important, or how are we able to balance between both those areas?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot that the consumers themselves can do to make sure that they're adopting this new technology, that they're actually utilizing it. Fintechs in the way that we speak about them now in the region are relatively still new, and so people are really kind of learning about them. Oh, you have to do it online, you have to apply online, you send me your documents online. That's kind of a foreign concept to them. They're much more used to the idea of going to the bank, handing them all the official papers and waiting for an answer. And so a lot of people are kind of starting to see the ease of use, the convenience that these fintechs are providing them with, but it will take time because there's a little bit of resistance before you actually see mass adoption to a new approach of doing things. And with that, obviously there has to be awareness in terms of how you're using your accounts and what information is being collected on you. So awareness from the consumer, and obviously good policies, security policies from the fintech providers that are overseen by the regulators is critical for this business to kind of bloom.
Important. Sorry, Yasmin. From a regulator perspective, how can you ensure that nobody comes and attacks the regulator when it comes to balancing between security and innovation? So that risk, how are you how will you be able to help that?
Well, definitely with financial innovation, the financial risk is going to change in the future. The regulatory responsibility here is to come up with an appropriate risk management framework to ensure that fintech startups, as well as existing banks and other financial institutions that will move towards innovation, have effective risk management systems in place in order to identify, monitor, and mitigate these risks. Another point I want to say is that I believe that regulators should not allow or they shouldn't regulate or license any innovative solution without fully understanding how that solution actually works and without understanding the risks associated with the solution itself. Another option will be to allow these solutions to be tested out through the regulatory sandbox, which will provide the regulator with the chance to get to understand how the solution works, the risks implied with the solution in order to come up with the right regulatory framework in place. I also believe that innovation will provide us with smarter ways to deal with risks in the future.
Well, Yasmin was just saying, to help, better understand. And Khalid, you brought up the point earlier about educating. So, if I were to say, we need to actually go through this process to better understand the technology, how would, for me, if someone comes and gives me this whole explanation on how they're going to basically allow me to onboard a client and, with all of this, fancy finance words, how are we able to change the mindset within more traditional institutions through the educational line?
See, I think obviously a lot of people, for example, throw the terms, we need to do blockchain. Why do you want to do blockchain? Do you understand what blockchain is? Blockchain is cool. We got to do it. But I think a lot of terms are being thrown up. What needs to happen is, I think, one, it depends if you want to look at it from a corporate perspective or from an individual perspective. Now, with the prevalence of a lot of these new technologies, if we're looking at it from corporate or even individuals, you have to understand, for example, the basic principles. What does fintech entail? The different verticals that it entails. What is blockchain? How is blockchain used? What does it mean for an institution? How do you put in mind a proper blockchain vertical? Understanding things like cybersecurity. What does it mean? Why do you need it? And I think what happens is it needs to be simplified into a very basic level. At the end of the day, it's not really rocket science. I think people mix a lot of the technical know-how and terms with the principles behind fintech. And I think that is what really scares people, because they start throwing a lot of terms and they sound very intimidating. And so at the end of the day, really, it's how do you simply use technology to better deliver financial services? I think that's the simplest form to put it. But what does it really mean, I think, for the individuals? I think as an individual, we got to start at the grassroots level. Even at schools, how does financial technology affect you? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your future delivery of services? You got a lot of kids that are coding, every little kid has a mobile phone, so they're already switched on. So it's not very difficult for them to start grasping these terms. I think for corporates, if I look at where a lot of the corporates are, it depends. If you're more of a tech-oriented player, you've already pretty switched on and know exactly what you need. You have what you need, you just maybe need a regulation, you need the ecosystem and so forth. But I think for a traditional corporate, obviously you hear digital things, you hear things are happening, there's always pressures even at a board level that, you got to put in a digital strategy. But I think it all boils down to what do you really need? And one example yesterday that I was hearing, and I find it great actually, but it's simple. I think sometimes if it's simple, you just need a simple solution instead of a very complicated solution. And going back to the blockchain example, it was, there's no point in doing blockchain just for the sake of doing blockchain. And the equivalent is, if I want to cross the street, do I need to build a shuttle to cross the street? You can just walk across. And so I think it all boils down to the culture, understanding what do we need, what are the important things for us as institutions that we need to change, what are the prerequisite skills that are required, and I think it's internal empowerment where you've got individuals that are continuously upskilling that will be able to deliver these concepts both to management, both to middle and lower levels of staff, and also communicate this very clearly to board levels and institutions. And I think it's just going back to basics. Keep it simple, and that's part of the awareness. And one example that, I always use this analogy is, if you're an institution, you've always thought about your competitors as in two big fish. You're a big fish, the other is a big fish. he's my competitor and I don't need to worry about it. But I think that just boxes you in one area. This day and age, that big fish is still your competitor, but you got to worry about the 1,000 little fishes that are chipping at you. So it's a simple understanding of why are these fishes there, what are they trying to do, what are they trying to achieve, and it's typically very simple problems. So the idea is just understand what it is and don't get bogged down into the details, technical details.
Yeah, sure.
To that, I think Bahrain has come a long way in fintech. We already have the ecosystem in place. We have collaboration between players in the ecosystem. We have the regulations in place, and we're working on developing further regulations. As Khalid said, I think what we need at this stage to further improve and accelerate our adoption of fintech and the move towards innovation is education. The mindset has to be, it starts at school, high school, university level. They have to start introducing courses in order to provide us with the future generations that have the required talents to meet the challenges of the future in finance.
Great, thank you. I mean, I'd like to include the audience before I have to be kicked off the stage. I think I have 5 more minutes left. So I don't know if there's any questions. Maybe we can take 1 or 2 questions. One, yeah. Okay, right here in the front.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and thank you for the distinguished panelists for a very interesting subject. My name is Walid Ahmadai from the Saudi Arabian oil company, national oil company, Saudi Aramco. Question that comes regarding fintech, which we always look at and consider, which is putting finance within the sphere of what's described globally as the 4th industrial revolution, and particularly 2 items that might be of an interest to the financial committee: big data. I think you have other dimensions: Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotics. You mentioned, Mr. Khalid, and blockchain. But I think big data, which represent a market expected to be around $190 billion in a 2 years' time, remains an area of, should be an area of interest for us in the Gulf to look at. Many financial institutions around the world are tapping into this as we speak. So I would like to hear the views of the distinguished panelists on what their views about this. Thank you.
Maybe we can start with Samer.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I guess you touched upon an extremely important point and topic, and it's foundational. It's not an ancillary. I don't think it's an option to use big data or not. I think in most industries, financial in specific, are definitely leveraging big data more and more. And I think it's an evolution, right? We can't say today we don't have big data, tomorrow we do. It's not like that. It's an evolution that the banks and the community will have to go through. We started, a couple of decades ago on paper record. We moved to digital, we moved to online. I think there's a lot of business intelligence that's been gathered. Now we are at a stage where this intelligence and the data that we have is being provided as insight, as an analysis of the data, not just what the data says, but what does it actually mean. And I think the next phase would be, and that's an internationally, it's a process, international process as well, is the next phase would be the data will actually be recommending and suggesting and maybe acting upon what a human's doing today. And if you've heard about algorithmic trading or high frequency trading, that's exactly what it is. It's building models that will actually replacing the human decision, not replacing humans, but replacing some of the human decisions that are being made. Another example is basically something like Betterment. I don't know if you heard about the company. It's a portfolio management company that's fully automated. So instead of the portfolio managers, human portfolio managers actually deciding where to put your investments in as a client, it's actually a machine who's actually suggesting to you where you put that. So all of this is using big data, because it's not enough to know what your account is, what your holdings are, what the options are in the market. It's also the experience, and using that experience and intelligence of what has happened in the past, and based on that decide where best to put, based on the risk profile, etc., where to invest in. As some examples of what is happening in big data, but there's a lot more, obviously.
Great, thank you. Yeah.
And I think you're absolutely spot on. Data is the new oil, and there's a lot of unstructured data to Samer's point. And with financial institutions or others, it's all, most of the time it's just a transactional relationship. For example, insurance. The insurance company, let's say motor insurance or just general insurance, I might have motor coverage with one company, I might have health coverage with the other company. Now, unless I actually use my claim, you don't really know much about me as, let's say, an individual, and therefore you have a lot of data which means absolutely nothing to you. I always say a telecom provider, and I see my friend from Zain here, sometimes they are significantly better equipped than your local traditional, let's say, financial institution. Now with my mobile, with the data, you can see, for example, I might start my work at 8, maybe end up at 4, then Khalid goes to the gym, then he does that. This guy looks like he's credit worthy. Let me push him a specific product based on what he's doing. And I think you're absolutely right, it's key. There's data, there's the distributed ledger, and it's changing a lot of things. And I think it's moving to that mentality of, and I think people have been too comfortable, and this is why they're just depending on these transactions as opposed to how can I really understand my client, how can I really add value to him. And this is why sometimes machines are significantly better than humans. It's a relationship and not just a transaction. And I think that's exactly why big data is important.
Okay, thank you, Khalid.
Can I just add one thing to that?
Yeah, just one, because I'm getting screamed at over here.
I think when it comes to data, it's going to serve regulators a lot in the future. Using artificial intelligence and machine learning, regulators will be able to benefit from big data when it comes to prudential supervision. We'll be able to, for example, we'll be able to get flags for certain suspicious transactions and to help us ensure financial stability.
Perfect. I see that this is a very interesting topic, but good news is for the people who have questions, try to catch the speakers in the speakers lounge, and you can get mad at the Unbound team for not giving us more time over here. I wanted to thank everyone that joined us in the heat. Thank our esteemed panel, and just to sort of sum up a little bit of what each one of them actually said, starting with, so basically banks need to understand risk and understand how, fintech poses new risks, providing solutions that we can better serve, not just the unbanked, but the people who aren't even using their banking, the banking services, including education and awareness, and making use of all the data that we have, so it's not just data and any type of technology that we use will all filter into even the future of finance. So thank you very much, Samer, Yasmin, Amira, and Khalid, and please do catch them in the speakers lounge. We'll be able to enjoy some refreshments and ask them all the questions that you do. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and yes, do try and grab the speakers if you have any questions. Next up, we're going to hear from Microsoft, who have powered the excellent startup exhibition in just up the stairs over there. We're going to hear from Ihsan, who is Chief Operating and Marketing Officer for the Gulf region from Microsoft. Please put your hands together and welcome him to the stage.
Where does inspiration come from? Where does innovation begin? Where does the future really start? Our story began in a dorm room in 1975 on a strip of paper. And from there, a vision was born. We designed technology to build, technology to grow, technology to learn, explore, and create. And we turned a world of possibility into a world of reality. But no journey is without obstacles, and our challenges only encouraged us to go further. This is a new chapter with new frontiers, new possibilities. possibilities, new obstacles, and a renewed passion and vision to face them all.
It is our mission to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for staying around so late and sticking around in the heat to hear me out. Is audio okay? Clear? Okay. It's a pleasure to be with you here. It's a pleasure to be a partner to Unbound Bahrain. I'm really excited to see the level of activity in the ecosystem when it comes to fostering innovation, enabling startups. I've been talking to many of the companies in the exhibition. The level of energy, the level of ambition is really energizing for us, and that's why we're here. In the 20 minutes or so that I have with you, I want to try to cover two things. First of all, just a quick update on where the company plays today, right? What are the things that you can expect to see from us? What are the things that we're really putting the company's energy and technical expertise behind from a technology standpoint, our worldview, if you will, and then how can we apply it to startups? How many of you in the room are involved in startups in any way or form? Okay, good. So hopefully we'll also share how can we help empower you? What are some of the programs that we have that then you can take and use in your own company, whether you're a startup or even a non-startup, a regular business that you can take. Let's see how. All right. So, I mean, the reason I showed that video at the beginning is we actually began with an idea, right? We began as a startup in 1975. It all started with a seed of an idea, a passion for learning, and then taking that idea to the global company that you see today, right? So it's really fascinating when you think of it over the past 40 years of that transformation that took place. If you think of the company's original mission of putting a PC on every desk and in every home, it was unimaginable at the time, right? It was a big, bold bet that many people thought was unattainable at the time. And I think it's safe to, we agree that it's there, whether it's in your pocket or on your desk. We all have access to tremendous capability today at our fingertips. If you think of what drives us today as a company, is that notion of empowerment, right? It's always been in our DNA. How do we really create technology so that others can create technology, right? You rarely see us shipping packaged products, right? We've always been about building platforms that others can take and build on, right? Whether it's the developer ecosystem, whether it's startups, whether it's IT pros. Even if you think of our cloud ecosystem today, and it's our fastest growing business today at Microsoft, at $20 billion cloud business, most of the cloud deployments and solutions are done by third parties, right? Are done by partners and by companies in the ecosystem. So it's important to remember the mission, this really timeless mission of empowerment, and that's what we're trying to bring to startups today, is how do we really help you empower your business with the tools and technologies, and I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. And it's important to also share with you the three key things that drive the way we think of technology design, right? The three principles that anchor us as a company when we think of design. The first one is what I touched on briefly, which is this notion of empowerment, right? We truly believe that technology is there to augment human capability, right? To augment human ingenuity, to really empower you to achieve more. Whether it's simple things like Office, and Office 365, and using AI to help you build a better resume. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this, but we actually have tools today in Word called the Resume Assistant that uses AI and uses LinkedIn for you to build a better resume inside Word, right? We even have a tool called the Editor that reviews, just like Grammar Check reviews grammar and spelling, this reviews the meaning of your document. Again, helps you become a better author or a better writer. So this notion of empowerment and using technology to augment human ingenuity is really ingrained in what we try to do. So that's number one. Number two is this notion of trust. And I really was happy to hear this discussion around security from the panel, right? In our increasingly digital lives, right, trust has to be in the fabric of everything we do, right? I mean, our entire identities are digital, right? Your entire personal life is out there, is digitized. So when you think of blockchain used for contracts or used for financial transactions, the amount of data that is out there is mind-boggling. So it's important to, trust goes beyond security, right? Trust goes deeper. It goes into privacy, right? Reliability, security, transparency. Are we really open with customers when issues happen? How do we really share information about issues? Do we tell you where your data sits and who has access and who doesn't have access? So, trust has to really be foundational in everything we do. One of the things we've done is we formed a cyber crimes unit at Microsoft that works with governments, works with customers to improve cybersecurity, to really help predict attacks before they happen. We use AI in our security infrastructure because we have billions of signals that we can detect, right, from Windows, from all our devices, that helps us get ahead of security threats. So trust is really important. And finally, this notion of inclusive design, right? We live in a very diverse world, right? I mean, if you look at a country like Bahrain, it has multiple nationalities, people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different languages, different age groups, nationalities, genders, right? So this whole notion of diversity and inclusion is critical, right? You cannot represent the world you serve unless your products are diverse enough, right? And you have diversity as a key design principle. So one of the things we do is we build accessibility into all our products, right? We have teams that look at the different cultural aspects of our products. We have tools like the instant translation that do use AI and machine learning to do instant language translation with Skype and Skype for Business and even PowerPoint, where you can do translation directly to, again, bridge that language divide. So this notion of being inclusive to everyone in the way we design and the way we build is important. And I just wanted to quickly touch on that. Now, a few years ago, Satya, our CEO, went out and defined the worldview of Microsoft. And it was around two things, mobile first and cloud first. The notion being that everything you will see from us will have a mobility first element, but also a cloud first element. And as we've seen the industry evolve with so many different experiences over just the past less than 5 years, with the growth of agents, the growth of data, AI, so many other services, this worldview of the company has really evolved. And I just wanted to touch on that very quickly and what it means for us. And the way we describe it today is this notion of intelligent cloud and intelligent edge, right? And I know it may sound sort of super theoretical, but let me just quickly explain it in a minute. So what we mean by the intelligent edge is the collection of artifacts and constructs that you use to interact and send data to the cloud. So in the broadest sense of the word, this could include your mobile device, this could include your wearable, this could include an IoT sensor, a smart vehicle, an autonomous car, even an entire city could be an edge to the cloud, right? So think of it in the broadest sense of terms, which is the collection of all the artifacts that interact with the cloud platform, right? And again, the mobile device is the easiest example. And today, if you think of it, there's a lot of disconnected things that you have to deal with. Your device and data estate is not at all sort of fully connected to an intelligent cloud, right? And down the line, we think once that happens, you're going to then start applying very interesting scenarios like AI, right? Where technology becomes ambient, it's pervasive, it goes out of your way. Where, for example, you use natural language. You can, we know digital agents today like Cortana and Siri and Alexa are very commonplace. But in the future, you're going to see much more ambient computing on the edge, right? So we're going to push a lot of those computational scenarios to the edge of the cloud, and the cloud will be, again, for specific high-intensity workloads. So I hope I explained it to you in a very short way. But this is where you can expect Microsoft to play. You're going to see us continue to invest in intelligent cloud capabilities with Azure, right? Things like Microsoft AI, Microsoft 365 and Office 365, but also push the boundaries to compute on the edge, right? With new innovations in chipset, hardware, software, even things like Azure Stack that allows you to run Azure locally in your own data center, right? And I'm not sure how many of you know this, but you can use something called Azure Stack, which serves as an edge to the cloud in your own sort of environment and data center. So that's just quickly what I wanted to touch on. Now, for you, for startups, one of the biggest things we want to sort of help you skill up on and use is AI, right? AI has been foundational to Microsoft for over 25 years. Many people actually may not know that we've been in AI research for over 25 years, but now we see a major growth in AI in different sectors. And the reason being attributed to three main things. Number one is data, right? You've always had AI research, but at this moment in history and in technology, you have so much data that you can actually train AI and make something meaningful out of those algorithms, right? So there's a vast data set, and I'll share some examples of just the massive amounts of data that we have. So data has been behind much of the growth that you see today in AI scenarios, at least the talk about AI. Number two is cloud, right? Again, you had a lot of research in AI, but you never had the computational ability and power to actually process all these algorithms and execute at scale, right? So the cloud allows you to do this. And finally, breakthroughs in algorithm research that we've seen, right? Whether it's in computer vision, natural language comprehension, speech, right? There's been a massive, exponential growth in research in those areas. For example, we recently released a benchmark that showed almost human parity in computer vision and speech recognition, where a computer can actually identify images and understand language and speech almost as good as a human being with less than 5% error rate, which is mind-boggling, right? So data, cloud, and algorithm, right? Those three things. So just to give you an example on data, and one of the things that we can offer to you, whether you're a startup or a business, is we have one of the largest data sets in the industry, right, bar none. And that comes from three key things. Number one, the knowledge we were able to acquire around the world. Bing, for example, gets 2.5 billion queries a month, right? So 2.5 billion entries from Bing that we actually can reason on, and we can collect all these signals. We have Cortana, our digital assistant that has 150 million users. Again, when they talk to Cortana, we can actually analyze and reason on these signals, on those data sets. 1.5 billion users of Windows, right? So if you think of all the Windows devices out there, again, we collect so many signals that we can reason on and use for our AI research. So that notion of world knowledge is a huge advantage that we have in AI. Number two is work knowledge. So if you think of the assets we have on work knowledge, we have 120 million Office 365 subscribers, right, that use Office 365 applications every day, right? That's a vast data set, right, of subscribers. We recently acquired LinkedIn. LinkedIn has 500 million, half a billion professionals on the network, right? That's an incredible asset from a work knowledge point of view that allows us to, again, improve analytics and improve AI in our platform. And finally, people knowledge, right? Again, I mentioned Windows, I mentioned Cortana, your identity in Outlook.com, your identity in Office 365. We can reason on all this massive data set and continuously improve our algorithms and provide real-world services that you can consume. And I mentioned some of them, right? The ones I mentioned in Word. I encourage you to look at LinkedIn and some of the services that it offers that use AI on the back end, Office 365. One of my favorite is called My Analytics. I don't know how many of you heard of it, but basically it's like a fitness tracker for my workday. So it tells me how much time I'm spending in email, who are my most common collaborators, who am I losing touch with, right? Who should I keep in contact with? Are my meetings being efficient? So it actually looks at my calendar and then knows that during this meeting I was doing email, right? And it sends me a notification to tell me your meetings have not been efficient because you've been doing 60% email in your meetings, right? So we're using these amazing sort of data sets to give me more insight, as an example, about my workday. And many, many more, but again, I need to leave shortly. And then there's 5 things that I also wanted to share with you that you can expect to benefit from on the AI front. The first one is vision, right? So we release a lot of APIs on computer vision that you can incorporate in your applications. We have a great app on the App Store, if you have an Android or an iPhone, called Seeing AI, that uses AI to help people that are either have low vision or that are blind to get a description about the person in front of them, identify currency, right? Identify objects using their camera. Right? So that, again, is an amazing use case of AI to help somebody who's blind or has impaired vision. We have the language API, so we have great features. Again, if you're a startup and you need to build applications that you need language, or natural language comprehension, we have the Microsoft Translator. Today, it supports 60 languages from text and over 9 languages for speech. Speech, again, another key area. So we have the cognitive services toolkit that you can use as developers to build speech applications, search with Bing, and finally knowledge with Cortana. We'll make this available to all of you. Now, for startups, very quickly, okay. Oh, this clicker is too fast. Okay, so for startups, how can you apply all of this, right? So this is a lot of information, right? There's 2 things that startups at the end of the day require. 2 things, and I know I may be oversimplifying, but there's 2 things fundamentally. Access to technology, and I shared with you some of the platforms we offer specifically on the AI front. And finally, access to customers, right? At the end of the day, it's important for you to get your product out there, whether from a marketing standpoint, but also from a sales standpoint. And we can help you with those 2 things. We recently launched, oh my goodness. Okay, a program called Microsoft for Startups. You can just search on it online, Microsoft for Startups. It provides many things. First of all, it gives you Microsoft Cloud credits. So you get free credits as a startup to host your business and your applications on the Microsoft Cloud, right? Mainly Azure. So you can build on Azure. You can use some of the things I shared on our AI tools, and you can get Visual Studio. You can get some really cool stuff for free if you qualify. There's a qualification criteria, but it's not a high bar, right? So you can check that. Number 2 is we have programs within Microsoft where our sales force, we have 40,000 sellers worldwide. So our sales force gets incented whenever you sell your IP, so your product, if it's hosted on the Microsoft Cloud. So if you have a product that is hosted on Microsoft Azure and you sell it, right, our salespeople get credit. It impacts their quota, which means they're incentivized to actually help you sell. So we call this IP co-sell. So if you ever heard somebody from Microsoft mention IP co-sell, it's the ability of the Microsoft sales force to help you sell your solution. And they're not doing this just to help you. We actually build programs to pay them, so they get paid if they help your product become successful. So explore that, right? This is a big incentive for you because it gives you access to 40,000 sellers worldwide, thousands in the region that can help. And we have many, many stories that we used with this. Obviously, the development tools that I mentioned. So you can use any language, whether it's a Microsoft language or a third-party language. So obviously, we support all the programming languages and platforms, even open source. Right? Many people do not know that the Microsoft Cloud is actually one of the largest open source clouds. Right? So you can host Linux VMs, you can build R and Python applications, you can do all these things on the Microsoft Cloud. And finally, we constantly do community activities and community events. Right? So we partner with local accelerators like Flat 6 Labs, for example. So we bring our own engineers to help with mentorship, help with training. So look out for these events because we bring people that are subject matter experts to connect with startups to help you and provide mentorship and support with building your applications. And just before I close, this is just a quick rundown of some of the different services you can qualify to under the Microsoft for Startup program. So $25,000 of Azure credit, and it can go to up to 120K. You can get access to development tools. You can get access to productivity tools with Office 365, technical support, and finally Startup Co-sell, which is, again, it gives you access to the Microsoft Salesforce, where if you have IP that is built on our platform, we can help you sell it, right? We can actually help you promote it and sell it. So we actually do two things. We do co-marketing, where we help list your product on the Microsoft catalog, right? And then we do co-selling, where our sales team gets incentivized for selling that IP. That's it. So as a next step, visit this site, startups.microsoft.com, have a look. Please give us feedback, right? Start using some of these tools that I mentioned. And we're very, very keen on helping that ecosystem in Bahrain continue to develop and grow. I'm sorry I had to cut it short, but I hope it gave you a good overview. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Izhan. I hope you make your flight with plenty of time. And make sure you do check out the Unbound 50 Zone powered by Microsoft when you have a chance inside. Next up, we have our next In an Elevator session chaired by Ali from Social Media Club. These are our stories of success from some well-known founders. Please welcome Ali and Fish.me to the stage. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello again. You will see me 4 times this 2 days. So tomorrow we have also another 2 interviews. We have a dear friend here, Hamad Traif. He's an entrepreneur. He has a startup and he did a couple of projects. We will know more about his projects and how he did it and what is his advice to the startups. So tell us, Hamad, more about your project.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hamad Traif, co-founder of Fish.me. Basically, Fish.me is a platform that links consumers directly with fishermen for their seafood requirements. So you get your fish delivered directly to your houses. Nice. Before establishing that, I established a previous company called Fish Transporter. And Fish Transporter was on-demand purchase and delivery for fish. So we used to do the same thing, but on an individual basis. Now it's a platform that allows all fishermen and fish retailers to sell directly to the consumer.
It's an online project? It's an online website, application?
It's a mobile app, actually. We have 2 parts. We have the seller app and we have the consumers app. Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's a mobile application. You can download it, you can check it out, and you can order fish, choose fish, and do that. Okay.
And more on that, they can even select the cleaning type that they want. We can do filleting, we can do scaling, etc., etc. So
without wasting time and go to the fish market, you can just, click it on your mobile.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a real business. It's not like an application. Is that a company? Is it?
Yes, it's a company actually. We established 2 companies. First, the Fish Transporter, and now we have Fish.me based in BVI and expanding here in the region.
Okay, nice. So what does it take to be an entrepreneur?
Well, to be an entrepreneur, it's either you have it or you don't have it. So I didn't decide to be an entrepreneur. I saw that there is a niche, there is a gap between fishermen and consumers. And usually if you are an entrepreneur, you find a problem and you try to find a solution to that problem. So the problem was people purchase fish from hypermarkets, or they don't want to go to the fish market because it's smelly. They don't want to do cleaning. All these problems, we packaged it in one location and we found a solution to it.
Nice, great. And is it successful?
According to our numbers, yes. Great. We are generating revenue.
So tell us, how you define success for any startup?
Success, it comes in different forms. It could be financial success. It could be that you solve the problem completely. It's just different aspects if you look at it. But if you combine all of them in one line, being successful doesn't mean that you are generating money. But in this region, it's of course, or any other region, of course, if there is no income, the success will not be, let's say, noticeable. When you are talking about being successful, sometimes it takes more than the regular time. Everybody knows that a regular company, if it is established, it takes minimum 3 years to be able to grow. We surpassed that phase, and now we are on the growing phase.
Yes.
Yeah.
So tell me, what do you advise to the entrepreneurs? You've been entrepreneur for a couple of years now. You did the fish transporter, and now fish.me.
Yes.
So being an entrepreneur, what do you advise other youth guys, or let's say anyone who would like to step into entrepreneurship?
Deciding to step into entrepreneurship will require always passion and courage, devotion. You should love what you do, and you should find a problem, a real problem, and try to overcome that problem to find solutions. So
Good.
yeah.
Nice. And how you finance yourself? I mean, your project needed some capital to invest in the digital arena, in the business.
Yes, of course. Previously, I was an employee in one of the entities here in Bahrain, and it was a very difficult decision when I wanted to start the company. First of all, it's better to start it with someone else. You don't start alone. And we put a little bit amount from our pockets, and then we tried to seek for investors, and we got some investment so far. We didn't close the round yet, but we have investment for the next year.
So how you raise funds? Is it through the friends, family, competitions?
Yeah, it always starts with friends, families, and fools, as they say, 3 Fs. And your first adopters, the clients, you should go back and forth with them to know if you are doing well or not. And once you have your minimum viable product, MVP, you can approach investors, angel investors. We have a couple of them here in Bahrain. We have Tanmur, Rawad, Tamkeen, they are doing a great job. And we have regional VCs as well. So we received an investment from back from the States, and another investment from here in Bahrain. Yeah.
Are you moving outside Bahrain?
We're planning to expand in the region. So our next station hopefully will be Kuwait.
Kuwait?
Yes.
They love food.
They love
fish.
food, and adaptation of technology is amazing over there. Yeah.
So once again, it's fish.me. It's a website, an application?
It's just a mobile app.
A mobile app.
Yeah.
So you can download, you can choose, and you can use it.
Yeah.
Free of charge.
Free of charge.
Thank you very much. This is Mohammed Raif from fish.me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Ali will be back tomorrow with some more successful founders and their stories. Next up, we have Caroline from CNN, who will be moderating the next 2 panels. Please welcome her to the stage.
Where is she? Hi, Caroline. Should we use this? Yes. Okay. Somebody would introduce them.
First, scaling a region, we have Samir Bagar, Managing Director, Middle East of ClearTrip. Fatima Ibrahim, Country Head, Bahrain for Action Global Communications. And John Hall, Global Chief Growth Officer for Eastman Kodak Company. Please put your hands together.
Thank you very much. Okay, good afternoon. I know it's a bit hot here, and we don't have a lot of people, but we have quality of people here. So that's what really counts. So thank you very much for being here. And I'm sure that the member of my panels here are going to be really exciting with the knowledge and the experience that they have. But I will be also depending on you, asking questions, engaging with the speakers here, because that would make it more valuable. Are we okay with that? All right. Thank you. So the format will be the following. I will give the floor to each one to tell us something about how do they understand the topic related to their work for about 3 minutes. And then after that, we'll start asking questions, but I'll be coming to you. Whenever you have any question, just raise your hand. So there will be no rules when it comes to this. So I'll give the floor to Salman.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Samir Bagul. I'm heading Clear Trip for Middle East region. We are one of the largest online travel company, primarily selling flights and hotels online. Yeah, so I think in terms of the topic, scaling the region, I think from our perspective, I mean, this is exactly, why I moved from India, setting up a large team in Dubai, and started scaling our business in the Middle East region. So, I mean, specifically, I think, a couple of years ago, we are fairly large in India in that sense, and we were kind of trying to figure out where is our next destination to grow, right? I mean, India is very competitive, it's a very large market, and it kind of goes back to, a couple of things, right, in terms of just the kind of those textbook things, right, in terms of how do you scale, right? So you should have absolutely a very large market, and Middle East kind of ticked all the boxes in terms of the huge air market and the travel market and the hospitality sector here, and obviously the ecosystem in terms of the capital, right? So that's another big reason that why we kind of came here, because there's a very strong investment community. We are actually completely funded by private equity funds and private equity and venture capital funds from the US. But at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity to work with the investors in the region here, right? So that's the kind of main reason. And then the third, obviously, largest reason was the consumer base itself, right? A highly online penetrated market, and that's what we want. We are a complete B2C organization, which is kind of directly going to the consumers. So I think all these 3-4 boxes kind of ticked very well for us from scaling. And being an online travel company, its scale is absolutely paramount for us. Our margins are very thin, so as long as we grow business multifold, we don't make any large revenues or other so that was the objective. So over the last I think 3 to 5 years, we actually significantly scale our business. We continue to do that now. And I probably will talk about more in terms of the opportunities that are here and some of the challenges that we are facing. But I think
thank you very much, Fatima.
Okay, so we live in a world where we fall into 2 buckets, and I'm going to break this down a little bit. We are either disruptors or we're either disrupted. So these 2 are either working together now or they're competing against each other. And I think in terms of disruption and innovation, we've had that for a very long time. It's nothing new. But the difference is this time it's digital disruption, it's digital innovation, and that happens at a much faster scale. So disruption doesn't happen in a couple of years like the traditional times. It's happening within weeks, sometimes within days. And what can companies do to minimize the risks that are coming their way? And in the Middle East, especially now, what we're trying to do is become powerful, digitized economies. And to do that, we'd have to jump on the bandwagon, become digital, know the risks, change some of our departments, the way that we look at things, the outlook of the Middle East in general, and how we can focus on digital initiatives locally and export digital initiatives regionally to our neighbors as well. And I think this is really interesting because at the same time, when we think digital, everyone is saying, oh, we advocate innovation, we love disruption, but what are you doing to back up that statement? And that's the hardest part. Are you renovating your business model? Are you supporting startups that are digitally innovative and having them be part of your business as well to advocate that future? And we're going to be talking a little bit about the difference between tech-savvy consumers and also tech-savvy producers, which is a very interesting word.
And I think the whole topic of disruption is to, and I read this from a McKinsey report, is to act before you have to. So now is the time for us to act and put in place some of the initiatives that we need to help us kind of gain a little bit in the race of what's happening in digital innovation. And we're going to discuss some of that later on with the questions.
Thank you very much. John?
Thanks, Caroline. So we're a brand you've clearly heard of. We're a 130-year-old startup called Kodak. We celebrate our 130th birthday this year. Happy birthday, Kodak. So we are a brand everybody knows, recognizes. We've looked very closely at this region specifically. We see this as pretty much, if you look at it on a map, it's the center of the world. There's reasons why Emirates and Etihad and various airlines have picked this as a specific location to base their airlines and fly non-stop around the planet. We have been coming here for a long period of time. We were the first company to come to Dubai to be in the Jebel Ali Free Zone. We've spent a lot of time coming here to Bahrain to spend time with His Highness and various other people within the Economic Development Board who have really created some fascinating programs to bring Kodak here, specifically around Tamkeen and specifically the support from various members of the EDB who've just been absolutely first class. Can't thank them enough for their help and support. We are looking at creating a production and manufacturing facility here in Bahrain with one of the major families in the region to produce a series of technologies. I mentioned we're a 130-year-old startup. We've reinvented ourselves many times, and the latest iteration of Kodak right now is a variety of new cutting-edge technologies as well associated with our brand. And the examples I'll give you, here in Bahrain, we are producing a porous particle facility that can go specifically onto a material. So if you take, for example, a beautiful curtain or silk fabric, we can coat this with our Kodak porous particle technology and make it block out light completely or deflect ultraviolet light completely. At the other end of the spectrum and in the military application, we can actually deflect infrared. So you can put this product on a surface and make it completely visible to infrared night vision. So a bit of a game changer there. If you think of our core heritage and legacy of Kodak, I'll just try and find one in my pocket. This is my business card. So this is some of you may know what this is, some of you may not. This is a polymer negative that in the old ancient days everybody used to take photos with. We literally had the original disruptor and the original pioneer, George Eastman, as our founder, and he was the guy that invented the original camera. He was the guy that invented X-ray film. He invented a whole raft of technologies. We were the only company, apart from NASA, to go to the moon. We are also the guys that have followed this retro cool thing right now. I'm not cool, I'm a suit. The retro cool thing whereby we've jumped on the analog bandwagon. So whilst Kodak invented the digital camera and decided not to bring it to market to disrupt our film business, and the reason why we didn't then do that, and it's not documented in the Harvard Business School case studies, we were producing 14.6 billion linear feet of this stuff, 80 cents a linear foot with a 60% margin. So why would you disrupt that? We didn't see the digital revolution coming quite as quickly as it did. Digital completely disrupted, film fell off a cliff. But now, I'll give you an example, we are the only people in the world that make film for motion picture. The iconic directors, Lucas, Nolan, Tarantino, Spielberg, Mendes, Abrahams, will only ever shoot film on film. So we've got this glorious band of ambassadors that literally fly around the world with us. I've actually got Christopher Nolan coming out to the region in a couple of weeks' time to spend some time with us in and around the region. But everybody seems to think it's a digital disruption. You've also got the analog disruption coming back, and we're actually bringing products like the Super 8 camera back to market. We're bringing products like the Instamatic camera back to market. So you take the shot and it's printed out immediately there and then. So we see Bahrain as a core hub for a variety of reasons. We're looking to create jobs here with our manufacturing facility.
And we need to stop here because we need to continue the discussion, and definitely we can share the rest of the ideas. Thank you, John. It's so beautiful. The picture is beautiful from the three of you, but I'm sure that you also have some challenges.
Yeah.
Can I hear some of the challenges that you're facing in basically considering this region and especially where we are now? Please.
Sure. Yeah, I think, as I said, although this region poses a huge opportunity in terms of growth, it comes obviously with challenges, and I think purely from our perspective, right, given we are a B2C organization, it is extremely important for us to scale faster, and that means a lot more consumers should know us. Creating consumer awareness, brand awareness is extremely key for us. And specifically in this region, we are finding media is fairly, I would say, not competitive, but it's very costly to scale.
Do you agree with that?
And
anybody agrees or disagree? Is the media very costly here?
I'm talking about the mass media, like television, newspaper,
yeah, television,
the mass
yeah.
media. Yeah. And at the same time, it's also kind of pan-Arab, right? I mean, which is great because if you're building a very large.
But you're comparing it with what, Samir? With which region? With comparing with largely India,
right? And because that's where we are based out of. But having said that, yeah. So if you want to really target, let's say, for example, a particular country within the regions, for example, it's Kuwait or Qatar, right?
Yes.
It's difficult for us to do using mass media because it's mostly pan-Arab, right? The targeting is slightly kind of weak. So then we are actually relying on the most, innovative methods like social media, of course, online. We are heavily invested and rather big spenders on online marketing, right? And
would the language, Arabic language, be considered as one of the challenges?
Yeah, that's the second challenge, right? Which is actually not a challenge. I think it's a great learning for us as well that Arabic first should be the approach in this region because it brings natural scale, right? Once you have Arabic, right, you basically build that trust in the consumers. And once you do that, obviously, a lot of efficiencies you can build throughout your product and growth. So that's, but at the same time, it's not very easy also to find Arabic talent with respect to, again, technology. So having combinations of technology with Arabic background and things like that. So you have to basically go after, and obviously it's changing a lot. And there have been a lot of investments going on in this region, and there are a lot of startups. Like some of our competitors have actually started in this region and grown on the back of the technology talent, specifically in Dubai. I know a very large company based out of Bahrain in the online travel space, investing millions of dollars here. Of course, in Lebanon and Jordan, these regions also kind of coming up. So I think, yeah, I mean, I would not say Arabic is a challenge, but yeah, of course, in terms of cost and stuff like that, some of these things are a challenge. Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Fatima?
No, I agree.
Or you have different challenges?
Yeah, I do. I come from a different sector, but it's not really about what sector you're from. I think the challenges are quite the same across all borders. When you have a company, you start with a certain mission and a vision, and that doesn't apply anymore. I think the mission stays the same, but your vision with all these disruptions is going to have to be adaptable. You're going to have to change it a couple of times, because one week you'll find a new technology that matters to you now or matters to a certain component of your business, and your vision starts to change. And that's, I think, what's the problem with traditional institutions in Bahrain. They rely on one way of doing things, the traditional methods. So whenever they hear of a disruption coming along, they kind of ignore it and say, oh yeah, we love innovation, we advocated, we're going to help all the startups out there and support them. But they're not doing it themselves. And that's where they get lost. And to navigate a whole world of disruption is the most difficult. And I think the challenges that they face, one, do they have digital leaders within the company that can help them navigate that map? Not really. Two, excuse me, do they also have a team that is dedicated just to see the trends that are happening? Do you have a team externally or within the company that says, well, these are the trends happening right now, which ones can we locally bring into the company, what can we do? I think if a company does all these little components or these little tasks, you're really not advocating any disruption, you're not taking it seriously, and you're gonna get lost in the clutter, and then it's too late by then, because things do move at a faster pace at this time.
Thank you. Do you have the same challenges, or do you have different types of?
I think there's two challenges for us. I think number one, there's a brain drain here in Bahrain, where a lot of the talent leaves Bahrain to go to university in the UK or the US and various parts around the world and doesn't come back. So for us, attracting some very highly skilled technology guys and girls is going to be quite difficult, and there's some very specific talents and requirements around that. I think the other fundamental problem of companies like mine is we're a US-based organisation. The world revolves around the US. So it's this global versus local issue, and I've got a boss in our CEO who's very worldly and travels around and spends a lot of time here in Bahrain and Dubai and Saudi and various locations, but there's many other people within my organisation that just really don't understand some of the local markets, and that really has some significant challenges, especially in trying to do business, specifically in this region. We've actually brought out some high-level technical guys and girls to the region to spend time with us who had got one very wrong perception of this marketplace, but having been here and seen what's going on and this sort of event, their eyes are completely open. But it's always going to be an issue trying to change that mentality internally.
That's very interesting. I hear some other people who sometimes, they say that the legal aspect is still a challenge as well. I didn't hear any of you mentioning that. They need to have a proper, legal system that would basically guarantee their rights and make them feel that they are safe. It's not only there's no VATs in other places, or less like 5 and now in the Gulf, but also you need to have other benefits that would guarantee your rights, and you feel that you are, you have a proper, strong legal body that you can depend on. Do you feel that this is also part of your challenges?
Yes and no, because I think pretty much all the countries in the region are actually doing their work in this space of building, especially the ecosystems, which is like whether it's free zone or parks, where they are allowing companies to
without sponsor.
Yeah, exactly. Without not only work without sponsors, but also creating an environment which is far easier, right? In terms of either you don't really need complex permissions and things like that to basically carry out your own business, which is generally which you would want to do it to scale. So I think it's in that sense I really don't feel that is a big challenge. But yes, there are certain sectors definitely, which I think every country has a kind of a protectionist kind of systems in place to protect certain industries and certain sectors. Like for example, in India, in retail, only the multi-brand retail is allowed. Single brand retail is not allowed. So like that. So I think, but over a period of time, I think that's changing. And even let's say, for example, in UAE, we are kind of now seeing government trying to create e-commerce parks or other e-commerce to allow e-commerce industries to basically, be like the free zone without basically being a mainland company and still operate as a proper e-commerce with logistics and with trade with multiple nations, right? I think with that, there's one challenge though, we think, which is cross-border. I think this region, when we're talking about, because when we come here as an organization, what we see opportunity as a whole region, not one particular country. And there's specifically in travel, if you look at, there's a lot of travel that is happening between the region itself, like in the entire Middle East, not only just the 6 GCC countries, but also the entire Middle East. How can, this is probably beyond, I don't know, the scope of this topic, but I mean, how can all these nations can work together to solve some of these cross-border issues and seamless. So, for example, if I want to basically start simultaneously across all the 6 countries, is it easier for me to do? Yeah, I mean, there are challenges. It can be definitely removed and fixed. So I think
these are bigger challenges than the one that we will be discussing here. Do you keep that in mind, the legal aspect? Because I saw John was smiling, so I know that he will give us something. But what about you, Fatima?
I can speak in terms of legal. I'll speak in terms of Bahrain.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anything that's on the cloud, anything that's digital right now, you can't have a lot of restrictions because it doesn't allow them to do their max capacity if you're restricting them. And I think the governments now are trying to understand that. And in Bahrain, I don't know if people have heard of the virtual sandbox that we have. So e-commerce startup that wants to test payments or want to test their startup, they actually have a virtual space governed by the CBB, so you do follow certain regulations, but you're free to test it with customers. You have a time limit that's, I think, good enough in terms of getting your results in, and you get a lot of support by the governments and other institutions to do that. So that's one thing that I think is good, and I agree with Samir in terms of having a certain legal framework in different countries as well that works the same way to allow people to thrive online. And it's different. I think legally online it's much simpler, but it's also in terms of the risk of cybersecurity, which is a big topic right now, and we're trying to tackle that. And like I said, you can't solve something digitally that's disrupting the market now 100%. You can only go 50%, try to work it out then, and then retest it a couple of times. And I think John can touch more upon that.
So tell me why you're smiling.
Why I was smiling? The reason why I was smiling is this exact issue has come up multiple times for us at Kodak. Not just here in Bahrain, it's come up in Dubai. And we are a US-based organisation with legal teams, coming round and round and round the gardens on that one. I mean, we've got hundreds of legal people in Kodak. And you suddenly come to a region like Bahrain and you look at, do you engage with Bahraini law? Do you engage with New York law, because you've got state-by-state law, so is it New York law versus Bahrain law?
I work for CNN, so I have the same thing.
Of course you do. So we found our happy medium is everything is governed by British law. And it's literally the resolution solution that the guys in the US are happy with, the guys and gals here in Bahrain, and it's specifically in Dubai and Saudi and various other places, to have something, a contract and an engagement governed by British law makes it very, very easy. And that's whether everybody does that, I don't know, but that we've literally found from the complexities of, we could go round and round and round for weeks on red tape with legal stuff, that to get stuff done, we do it with British law.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, I need to ask you a question now. We hear all the time innovation, innovation, innovation everywhere. Do you really feel that the governments are really serious when they discuss innovation? Do you agree with this? And I'm going to come back to you as well. Anybody would like to answer? If you don't raise your hand, I'm going to ask you. So you can pick and choose, whichever. Please. Can you tell me if you feel that the governments in this part of the world are really serious when it comes to innovation? Or is it a fashion to use that term?
No, I think they're serious and they're doing more than they should do.
How?
Innovation really comes from people, from the citizen. And they're doing more than they should be doing. I think it's up to the rest to really do their part.
I need to understand now, who are they?
Whoever needs to innovate, the entrepreneur, the startups.
So these people, the innovators, and the people who are very much interested in this, they should depend on themselves, not depending on the government. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. And normally the main challenge is the regulation and the government. And here they're giving really an easy ride where the government itself is supporting them.
Okay.
So I think it should be easier for them really to innovate in a country where it's coming from the top. The support is coming from the top.
Would you mind just tell me what exactly do you do?
Sorry?
What do you do?
Actually, I cover innovation at Thomson Reuters.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to say something? Please.
See, let me start by saying that innovation is a very wider topic, but the very fact remains that we have the best example here in Bahrain itself, which has been driven by Economic Development Board, embarking on transformation technologies, moving into cloud computing, and turning out to be a cybersecurity hub. So this is nothing but the convergence. If you want to bring in convergence onto the table, obviously innovation will follow. Every other program which comes up in Bahrain with all the limitations and the regional challenges, whatever we may state, it's highly innovative. And I think it's working brilliantly well today, and this session is just one of them, which has got a fantastic response.
Okay, what exactly the parameters? How would you measure success in the so-called quote-unquote innovation? Fatima?
Success?
Because when we say that we're successful, based on what we are saying that we're successful or otherwise?
We're successful when we see, first of all, a lot of external startups set base here. that means we're giving them the right environment to operate.
And stay.
And stay.
Yeah.
So I've seen, which I'm happy, I've seen a lot of startups from Saudi, from Dubai, from a lot of other GCC countries set up their headquarters here, even though whatever they're specializing in happens much more outside Bahrain. But the market here is small, and I think it gives them a lot of freedom to kind of disrupt this market much quicker than others. Two, I think the regulations, we have Temkeen, we have accelerators opening up, we have accelerators focusing on tech, on cloud, on AI. So they're very specific, and it gives every startup that's trying to specialize a space to kind of do that. So we're not very limited. And now we're hosting Unbound, which is an award-winning event. We're hosting a lot of other events as well in Bahrain. So we're giving them space to also pitch to regional and external investors while being in the same country.
Right.
And I think Bahrain does a good job. So success is really measured by the participation of startups, their commitment, their feedback, and how successfully are they reaching their customers here, and if we can give them access to other markets as well. If I hear a startup in Bahrain breaking the markets in Saudi and Kuwait and other countries, that means I've done my job right as a government in Bahrain, allowing them to do that in a quick space of time. So I think success is measured in that way, if you ask me.
You agree?
Yeah,
Success internationally.
my personal view, and specifically Bahrain is the comeback kid. Every single time Bahrain comes back, and if you take it way back, you know, the original country to build the longest runway to attract Concorde to come and land here. You know, the iconic airline in Gulf Air that everybody wanted to fly and every airline copied. You know, the financial industry that was created here. You know, you look where we are right now, the racing circuit. That was, you know, a pioneer for the region at the time. And now, looking at what Bahrain is doing in the startup community and really well and truly punching above its weight, making a really great noise globally. I personally, and they've certainly supported Kodak, I think products like Temkeen, and I call it a product, are brilliant. I think Bahrain's fundamental problem is it doesn't beat its chest as much as some of the other countries do. You know, there's a big song and dance in the UK right now that the Crown Prince of Saudi is running around having dinner with all the royals. I think as far as this country is concerned, it can equal, if not better, some of these countries that have just got the deeper pockets by using these kind of forums and platforms to really just say, look, we're here, we've got smart people, we've got smart brains, we've got cool technology, we can completely disrupt, I'd almost say disrupt the region. And by that, I really mean it's Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and our friends across the causeway.
Okay, Timmy, would you like to comment on that?
No, I think it's, in the morning also I kind of heard this similar kind of story where someone is talking about the innovation really happens at the grassroots levels, right? And specifically with higher, institutions, universities, right? Among the young population, the young people, right? And I think that's where probably John mentioned, right? There's a kind of brain drain happens specifically in this region where people go out, don't come back. But at the same time, there are now, pockets of countries and regions where they are actually coming back, and they're seeing that there are opportunities being created by the governments, like whether it's EDB or the central bank in Lebanon, and or the UAE government, right, creating the funds. So obviously, so I think that both ways, right? So right now, the way innovation is, or rather the investments in innovation happening, is from the kind of back end where they are actually creating an opportunity for easy accessible of capital, right? But at the same time, I think what should be more done is basically investments in actual education, higher education. Why do you let people go outside even for the first place? If the students get opportunity to study in the region itself, I think there's a lot more and grow, right? And then they get opportunity to basically not only work but also create their own ideas in the region. I think you can see a lot more startups and a lot more investments flowing in, and a much vibrant ecosystem than otherwise, right? I think that's one area probably the governments need to do a lot more, which is the kind of from the front end rather than just providing capital, right?
Can I add to Samir's point? I agree with you. Education is an important part, and I was just discussing this point today. We want the youth in Bahrain to contribute to the important sectors. Yet we always bring external people to do the job for us. But I think if we go back to the beginning of the pipeline, tell all the millennials that are trying to do everything, and now with the backing of the government, you know, because after all the challenges that we went through, we still had potential. But the challenges made Bahrain realize that of all the other uncapped potential that the youth can bring forward in the same country. And I think if we go back and educate them in all the sectors that they need to contribute to, the power just gets emphasized way more.
Maybe you need to, like, not only you, but I mean similar sectors also and companies like you need to talk also, have a really deep discussion with the universities to know what exactly they are like sending to the market. Because as you rightly said, you know, you might be sending them to take scholarships and study outside, but when they come back they don't have jobs, or those who are graduating from universities here or any part in this region, they will come out and they don't have jobs as well. So I think there's a like a off track, each one of them, and they're not really on the same track, and they're not talking to each other. So, and I, you know, from my experience, like I was recently in Saudi, and we also talked, I met lots of young people, and as you said, millennials are very, very, like, really creative, and they want to do something. It's not, they don't talk in a way that, why don't you do, no, they would say, why don't I do something, give me the space, which is totally different new language that we're hearing from the young people. But I think if we don't give them guidance, that's what we really lack. And that would basically, let me ask you, do you agree that the universities are not really, like really thinking or taking the matter of innovation seriously to produce and send to the market people who are really ready to start startups and to take jobs whatever they have vacancies? Do you agree with me? Anybody? Again, please.
I mean, definitely we see a disconnect between the universities and fintech. And I was just had a discussion with Mr. Khalid Saad from the Fintech Bay on the need for the Fintech Bay to cooperate with universities and to see more collaboration. We started doing that with some universities. We're trying to create labs between that bridge with basically universities and fintech. Yep. Definitely, there's a gap there.
But what's the solution? How can they talk to each other instead of turning the back to each other?
For example,
what do you think?
For example, we're trying to start. Let's say you have a project, an artificial intelligence project that you have in mind. Start talking to the dean and the professors to have one of the research paper offered to a master grad student to be on that topic, and a topic related to a product that the fintech or the business is challenged for them. So we really try to connect the three. There's a disconnect, complete disconnect now, to try to connect them through a real problem that the three can work on.
Thank you very much. That's very important. Anybody else? Please. You'll be afterwards. Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I believe enabling research-based programs for the students. So for example, Bahrain Polytechnic, they have the logistics, the industry project. So providing a project that the students could work on for their graduation, I think that provides a really exceptional experience for the students and for the industries to have a very younger, basically, perspective towards what's going on for the fintech. So
thank you very much. That's very good. Yeah, please.
Hi.
Hi.
You asked for a solution, and just from my perspective, because I just graduated and I can't find a job right now.
Congratulations for graduating, and I hope you'll find one.
Thank you. I even did a master's just to maybe potentially find a job.
Better
Still
job.
Doesn't help. So
what did you study?
Marketing, international marketing.
Anybody got a job? You have any job for him?
In the UK, they have this kind of magazine they release yearly, and it kind of does the statistics regarding what jobs are available, how many students are studying this in university, what field is more popular, or how is the job market for this specific field. I feel like maybe Bahrain should maybe do something similar to kind of educate the people before they study what's going to be more feasible or what's more practical to study, rather than just making me, for example, marketing is very common. Everyone studies marketing in Bahrain.
But did you do your homework before taking that step and going to get your master's? You felt that there's more opportunities for you if you go and get your master's?
Yes, but it also goes into the education, like what Samir said. He said that like degrees right now is so common, so that doesn't just stand you out. So I studied in the UK, I got my degree, so university, still doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So maybe we should just educate the younger people. I made that mistake. Maybe the younger people should maybe know the knowledge, understand what they should do and what they should study.
It might not be called mistake, but probably
Unlucky.
it's part of the challenge that you go through, and you need to, we learn.
Yeah, I agree.
Please, sir.
Sorry, what's your name? Ahmed, I have a question for you. Have you done any internships? Yeah. Okay, because, so I studied in the US at Northeastern University, and what we had was a co-op program where you work full-time for 6 months as an intern, where they had a platform that connected you. So it was basically a deal that the school had with a bunch of companies, whether they were tech, finance, anything related to your major. I'm not sure if there's a similar kind of program in Bahrain with universities here, but in relation to programs that would help students, local students, find jobs after graduation, I think that would definitely be a good step forward.
That's very important. From my little information that I have about universities, they do have internship, but it's a short time. I think it's maximum 1 month, which is not really enough. But nowadays the idea of joining and applying for internship after graduating, it's becoming now more popular, if you like. We at CNN we receive lots of now graduates who would like to get the training, and proudly we can say that all those who actually applied for our internship, they're all working. But as you said, you have to be slightly patient, and you need to apply to the right organization and be dedicated to it. It's not like you're going there just to do coffee or tea. You have to go and get the learning and the know-how in order to be able to go to the market and well prepared for the market.
Absolutely, and the benefit of this was that it was actually during the program.
Yeah.
So I was in my 3rd year, and I did 6 months in a software company. Then I went back to school for another semester, and then I had another 6 months in another software company.
And you're working now?
I'm working in consulting.
Where?
So it's a family company.
Okay.
After I graduated, I also worked for another 1.5 years in the US, but due to H-1B issues, I had to come back.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else before I go back to my team? All right. So now, let's see from now to 2030. Do you see yourself staying longer here or considering moving somewhere else? Let's be frank.
Yeah. No, I think it's a valid question. 2030 obviously is a long period. More than 10 years.
You consider it long now, but it's not going to be long. Trust me.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think given all the focus that's been driven by the governments and the organizations here of basically diversifying into I would say newer areas of business, we will see that happening absolutely. The next 10 years, anyway, globally also, from the technology perspective, I think it's a phenomenal growth opportunity that exists. So I think, here also in this region, we see actually there's a lot more opportunity. When we look at global growth, I think probably the regional growth is also very strong. Of course, we had seen a blip over the last couple of years because of oil and stuff like that, but I think that's probably gone now. And I think in the next 5 to 6 years, there's a significant growth coming back as I said, new innovative companies, startup, governments diversify, right? I think in terms of the economic growth also, in terms of for example, UAE focusing on 2020 Expo, right? I think that also will create a lot of opportunities, right, across the region. For us also, we look at travel as a segment. That is also undergoing a tremendous change. Of course, Saudi Arabia is one big market for us, and that's another. As they continue to invest in tourism, hospitality, that kind of opens up growth across the region, not just for the country.
Yep.
So we're seeing that as well happening in the next 5 years. That's going to happen. Same thing goes for Kuwait, Qatar. We are seeing significant growth in the airlines as well, as pretty much new airlines are coming up. We recently saw a Fly deal, which is the kind of low-cost carrier launched a couple of months ago in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Gulf, which is another kind of airline over there, expanding into the region and internationally. A lot of large hospitality groups kind of bringing new inventory in the market. So in terms of growth opportunities, I think there's a huge opportunity over the next 5 years. I really don't think that we need to look at. I think it's just about keep building, keep scaling, and keep investing. In the next 5 years, this region has a huge potential.
Thank you. Fatima.
I work for a global firm, but in terms of startups, because I have a fintech startup on the side as well, and we deal with payments for the Instagram marketplace. So when you talk about staying here, I think companies can stay in different countries over time for certain reasons. Like in Bahrain, I started, and then I would want to move to other GCC markets because I have access to that.
But you won't consider moving to Silicon Valley, for example?
I mean, I can never say no if the opportunity arises. I mean, but it depends on your purpose. It depends where you're going and why are you going there. Because a lot of companies kind of say, oh, I want to be everywhere. Asia's the market to be, India's the market to be, or that country's the market to be. But they don't know exactly
Is it healthy to be everywhere?
No. I think it's healthy to be the place that you need to be for a certain time, for a certain purpose. And if you have the power and a plan to scale yourself to be in all these markets, then why not? Why not be there? There's a lot of prominent markets that you should be in. And yeah, I think it really depends on your goal.
Are you staying till 2030, or you might consider somewhere else?
We've been going for 130 years, so I'd say in 12 years' time, hopefully we'll still be around and here, but we've only just begun. I mean, literally, we've just started here. And we've got this specific product that we've just kicked off here.
Yep.
We're talking with the EDB about bringing film labs and film studios here and creating a whole raft of other parts of our business here in the region. We see it as a core area to literally head over to India and head over to Pakistan and Iraq and Iran and various Saudis, the £800 gorilla for us. So we've literally just started. So bearing in mind how long it takes us to build some of these production and manufacturing plants, it's going to take some time. So we're certainly going to be here. And hopefully these two guys will be working in marketing for us as well.
Okay, before I close with giving them the final say, anybody has got any question for our speakers? Any question? Please.
This question is for Fatima. So how do you think that companies could better prepare for digital disruption in this region?
Thank you. Fatima.
I think there are several ways. One is to create digital leaders within your company. You have chief marketing officers, you have CFOs, but we don't have CDOs, I will call them, chief digital officers. I think because we're catering to tech-savvy consumers, but we're not doing tech-savvy producers, and that's a term that I read in a report that I liked. There's no one to lead the digital end or front in the company. Companies should also meet at least once a month, discuss the trends that are happening, and to see what trends fits your company, and localize it to your company and customize it in the region that you are in. And 3, I would say also do a crisis plan. If a disruption does hit your company and it's too quick for you to navigate, have you at least put some, I don't know, contingency plans to at least hold it off until it becomes a much bigger issue than you can handle? So it's really preparation. Like I said, you have to act, you act before you have to, so yeah.
Wow, that's very useful. Last question, and then we need to close because I think we need to start also the second panel.
Just on your point before about chief digital officers, shouldn't your CEO, your CMO, your CFO be chief digital officers themselves? Why does it need a position in itself? That should be part of your senior management suite.
I completely agree with you. And that was a question raised by a couple of people that I know. Any CEO, anyone in the company working should have that educational background. They should be all about digital. They should be in the meetings with that happening. But if you have a big company, let's just say, with 30 different departments, you need a dedicated let's just say, component that's dealing just with digital. People that are experienced in digital aspect, they have digital backgrounds, they come from a, they've studied for this, they've read the studies, they're more apt to act upon it when the CEO can't. So all of you together in the same area, but more specialized to do it on a daily basis would be your CDOs, if that answers your question.
Thank you, but they're going to be staying here, so don't worry. You can continue asking questions. I'm going to close by giving each one of you the chance to give one tip for the people who might be considering also to come and basically open an operation here. So give them one tip, and let's do it brief, please. Samir.
So companies are coming here and setting up, right?
Yeah.
So I think, the only tip is basically really try and basically differentiate to identify the problems which are to be solved from the local perspective. Obviously, because we see a lot of companies and a lot of ideas which are kind of me too, and have been kind of worked very well in the West or in Europe, right? But when you are actually trying and coming here, really I think you need to understand what do the local consumers need and how different they are. And if you can find that, I think that's the best
Wonderful.
solutions, yeah.
Thank you. Another tip, Fatima?
I'm continuing with Samir. People get excited when they want to start things, but they don't study the region. You have to figure out what people's pain points are. You can't just launch a product with no demand. Oh, this is a great idea, I'm going to do it. I'm pretty sure it is a good idea, but is it solving someone's problem in the region or a lot of people's problems? If there's no pain points, then that's going to be hard for you to do. You're going to have to reinvent your product until it solves somebody's issue. So yeah, find the pain point, do your research.
Wonderful. John?
Go and talk to Tamkeen, go and talk to the EDB, go and get yourself a mentor, and get yourself a very good advisor. The first thing I did when I got the job at Kodak was hire a guy who knows this market upside down, backwards, inside out, and he's just navigated his way completely through for us.
Wonderful. If I may add another tip, don't copy what others are doing. You are smart enough to create your own ideas and to innovate new ideas and go forward. So thank you very much to my panelists, and if you have more questions to them, definitely they're going to be in the area and you can continue asking them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Caroline is very kindly staying on to moderate the next session, which is investors, VCs, and their strategies. We've brought together a truly global panel of investors and VCs. Please step up to the stage. Davin, Principal of B Capital Group, all the way from Singapore. Debu, Managing Partner of Third Eye from the UK. Jasmine To, Senior Analyst of Quest Ventures, also from Singapore. Sonia Gokal, Partner from... Excuse us. Partner of VentureSouk from the UAE, and Alexander Wiedmer, Partner of Iris Capital from Dubai and France. Thank you very much.
Okay. So, do we start or we wait for them to settle?
Probably settle.
I'll give you a couple of minutes until you settle because I think you're still moving around. Oh, I was just looking for this. Please, come and join us. Or maybe here. Yeah. Yeah.
I know. You and I have got to do this.
No, I met Alexander.
Debu.
Sorry?
Debu.
Jasmine.
Sonia.
And alright, perfect. That's what you're not able to beat, that's fine. Okay, are we ready? Are we ready? Okay. Now, you know who who we have here in this panel, and we have lots of people with experience here, and they know what exactly investment is. So I'm not going to take a lot of time by explaining what the topic is all about. But I would like to give each one of you first 3 minutes to let us know from your experience what's your ideas are for 3 minutes, and then we will continue the discussion all together. I'll start with you, please. Dave.
Thanks, Caroline. Maybe just a quick introduction. So I'm Dave Ng. I'm currently based in Singapore for B Capital Group. We are a global venture capital fund with offices in the US, out of San Francisco and LA, and New York. And for the coverage of our Asian markets is based out of Singapore. So spend time in our US office 2.5 years back before moving to Singapore to essentially set up the presence over there. And what we look into is essentially investment in tech companies across broadly consumer and enterprise technologies. And we typically look into Series A, B, and C. So we invest in the range of $5 to $15 million US. Our view on investment generally is we believe that in the current time there are several broad trends that we look into. For example, right, data is inclusively becoming more and more pervasive. You see an explosion of data in the last 5 years, much faster than what you see in the last the 20 years before that. And then the second is really the emergence of platforms, right? So we talk about platforms like Facebook, we talk about platforms like Google. All these are platforms nowadays, and increasingly you see a lot of new ideas, new companies essentially being created on these platforms. So platforms essentially allow a lot of new innovations to hop on it. WeChat, for example, is a platform. You see a lot of micro apps nowadays on that. And finally, our third point of view is we believe that there's a lot of opportunities for startups to collaborate with large companies. So 3 key things that we look a lot into: broad global coverage, and in terms of the stage, that's what we do. And happy to dive deeper into some of these topics.
My name is Debu Purkasta. We run a small venture fund out of London. It's called Third Eye. We do what I call very classic Series A. So we write anything between $2 to $10 million checks in Series A companies. And so a little bit of my background. Before this, I was at Google for many years. I used to run part of the M&A and the investment team at Google, and then also the new business team at Google. And I was there for about 6+ years, under 7. Prior to that, online travel. So I actually went into online travel just as it was taking off. So lucky enough to be in the right place, right time. Bought a company called lastminute.com and then merged it with Sabre and Travelocity, and then sold it off to private equity, and then prior to that, banker, Wall Street, and then Valley. And from our perspective, what we're looking for is we're looking for basically the collective ambition of the founding team. That's pretty much what I tend to focus on. And fundamentally, what we are looking at is team, team, and team. That's the 3 things we look at. And I always say this because even though we are relatively slightly more advanced in the fund process as regards what we come in, we still find fundamentally that's where all the difference is made, just the quality of the team and the ambition. And ambition is something that I tend to focus on quite a bit, primarily because it's the one thing you can't change, it's the one thing you can't retrofit. You have your ambition, and your ambition set pretty much remains where it is or slightly expands. But it doesn't dramatically expand, and very rarely it dramatically contracts. So it's one of the few indicators that you can actually play on, in my opinion at least. So we tend to focus on that. In terms of geographical coverage, we do Europe and Israel today. And one of the things I really want to do at some point is to pick one market in the GCC and do that. I really want to do that. And I'm thinking of one particular country. I've been spending a fair bit of time looking at that, but it's still TBD. And then later this year, we probably are going to start doing some stuff in Southeast Asia. That's within our plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Jasmine?
Hey everyone, I'm Jasmine from Quest Ventures. So Quest Ventures is an early stage venture capital fund. we focus on seed up to Series A investments in China and Southeast Asia. We have offices based in Beijing and Singapore. And for myself, I'm based in the Singapore office, and I cover the Southeast Asia region. The industries that we are interested to invest in are what we term as a digital commerce. So for us, that means anything related to B2B, B2C, B2B2C, and also commerce enablers, for example, chatbots, AI, VR, AR, payment systems, fintech, products which enable commerce to happen. So in terms of our strategies and investment mandate, we look for three things when we evaluate a startup. The first is scalability, the second is replicability, and the third is large internet communities. Let me share a bit more on what these three things means for us. The first, scalability. So this means the ability for a business to grow from a $1 business to a $100 million business in the same city, for example, in Singapore. For replicability, this means the ability of this same business to expand into new cities, for example, growing out from Singapore to neighboring countries such as Kuala Lumpur, Jakarta, Indonesia, Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. And lastly, the startup has to be in a market which is big enough, large enough in terms of geography and in terms of industry sector.
Thank you very much. Sonia?
Hi, my name is Sonia, and I'm one of the founding partners of Venture Souk. Venture Souk, we're investors. We are not a traditional VC. We are a platform of investors where we have angels on our platform invest into various startups, mainly tech startups. Our platform mainly has investors based in the GCC, but our investments range globally. So we have investments around the world, some from the US, India, Africa, and Europe. We have a wide range of investors on our platform, and the strategies for each of those vary depending on their goals with respect to that investment. So our investors are split up in basically kind of three categories. You'll have retail, high net worth individuals who have a bit of discretionary money in their personal portfolio and like to invest into tech and have allocated some money to do so. So they're looking for various companies as they just really want to kind of ride the next wave. They want to be part of tech, be part of the hype. It's definitely one of those investments where you can talk to people about it at a cocktail party to say, yes, I'm in this and I'm excited about it. And that's definitely one part of their portfolio. The way they look at their investments is very different from the other groups. They look at their investments as kind of play money. So they want to find something that's interesting, high growth, high risk, high return. But with these type of investments, the investment has to resonate with them. They have to see a purpose. They have to say that, you know what, this tech is solving an everyday problem that they can understand and think it will change the world. So one of our investments that I'll give you an example of that resonated well with our retail investors was a company called What 3 Words. What 3 Words is one that has divided the world into 3x3 squares and given them a 3-word address. It's innovative. They think of it as being the next best thing, and now Mercedes is now putting it into their cars in their navigation system. Great story for them. They feel like they're being part of the next big thing. Our next kind of group of investors that fit on our platform have a completely different strategy. Those are family offices. They are looking to find family offices that are specifically made their wealth in one sector, or corporates. They're looking to find disruption and invest in disruption in their own sector. So if, for example, if you're a construction family, you're looking to see what is the next technology that's going to disrupt my business here so that I can invest in it now. Return is not the big driver. Return is where it's really, I want to invest in technologies and be a part of that early because I'm too big or unable to innovate myself, so I will invest in that through startups. And then you also have family offices that are just looking for high return but do it in a more strategic way.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Alexander. I think it's on. Now it's off. Yep. Can you use mine?
Now it's on. So my name is Alex. I'm a partner of Iris Capital. Iris Capital is a 32-year-old venture capital company headquartered in France, with operations though worldwide in the U.S., Canada, throughout Europe, also in the Middle East here, and in Japan. We invest in tech generally, from early stage right through to small buyouts, private placements in public companies. We can do pretty well any operation that we like, so long as it's interesting for our investors and it's in tech. When I was invited to join this panel, the first thing I did, and the reason why I was made to speak last, was to complain to Caroline that the topic was too wide. And I thought the topic was too wide because, you know, the first question of the panel is, well, what are the trends and what do you guys invest in? And I'm hard-pressed to say what it is that we specifically invest in. When we create a fund, we don't create it to invest specifically in cryptocurrency or specifically in real estate tech or in anything like this. And, you know, maybe because I'm more of a late-stage investor, we are actually inherently opportunistic. And so what we, at the end of the day, what we invest in is, you know, is great businesses with great fundamentals. The team is absolutely the first criterion. I very much agree. And also what is of interest to our investors. And the reason I say this is that, very much like my neighbor to the left, we also manage corporate money and we run open innovation programs for them. And I very much agree that that's a very important source of financing for funds today, and that the financial return for this sort of investor is in fact secondary, and what they're looking for is the impact on their strategy. And it's a relatively new source of financing, but a very, very important one.
Thank you very much. Now, some of you are based in the region, some of you are outside the region. Now, from your experience, what are like if we would like to identify 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses that are related to the region, if you want to consider opening business or starting something here in this region? Dave? Strengths and weaknesses.
Excuse me.
Can we get some water? Please, thank you.
So 3. I think I need some water.
Sorry?
I need some water.
Oh, sure. Okay, shall I give the microphone to somebody else until you're done? Please. Jasmine? Weaknesses and strengths?
Sure. I'll start with 1 strength and 1 weaknesses in this region, so the rest can have a go for it too.
Excellent. One.
So I would say 1 strength in Bahrain, which I've observed, is the strong support of the EDB. With the strong support of the EDB, this inspires and also motivates companies to help out. So the EDB helps and works together with startups and corporates for innovation in terms of providing capital, providing partnerships, and also providing advice, as they would have links and networks to regional investors, regional partners.
So that's a strength. What about the weakness?
Yes. I would say weakness, maybe as comparing it to China, for one example. I wouldn't call it a pure weakness, but a common mistake that I see is that startup founders do not move fast enough. So if they do not move fast enough, competitors pop up in the region, in their country, and overtake them. So I wouldn't call it a weakness per se, specifically to this region, but I would say it's a general weakness I observe around the region.
Okay, thank you very much. Dave?
Thank you. Much better. I think one key strength here is, you know, it's a relatively close by, you know, group of countries in the GCC, right? So we're talking about, you know, 50 million people, right? And like a $1.5 trillion US dollar economy. So pretty sizable large market, right? I mean, pretty close proximity from a consumer perspective. So, you know, to be able to go after such a market, I think is pretty interesting, right? I mean, if you compare to other parts of the world, right? India, right? 1.3, 1.4 billion people, right? But very, very a lot of diversity within the country, a lot of nuances. Southeast Asia, right? 600 million people, but right, it's really 10 countries that you have a lot of borders, a lot of different regulation consideration. So weakness, I think one perception, at least from an international standpoint, is that this is a region where you are very steep in tradition, right? You're very steep in a lot of ways of doing things. So I think that is more of a perception, right? Not necessarily a truth. So when you then come to the topic of innovation and trying to break things, move fast, and try to do things differently, innovatively, I think this is where potentially for investors or even entrepreneurs who doesn't understand the region well, right, might have that first barrier, perception barrier to overcome, right? For example, I come from Malaysia, right? So a country in Southeast Asia, and but I spent a lot of time in the U.S. I live in Silicon Valley for like 15 years, and when I talk to a lot of the people in the tech ecosystem there, for those that is less travel, they might not even know, where the heck is Malaysia, right? And they might not even know, what is it like, what's happening there. So I think similarly, right, in this region, there's, that kind of perception barrier as well for people who doesn't understand the region to overcome and to be willing to come into it.
So lack of knowledge from the outsiders about what's happening about this region.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Alex?
Well, I think on
1-1. I would suggest that you don't turn it off. Just keep it.
I didn't think I had turned it off. So
No,
I think on the plus side, there's a tremendous willingness you see in young people here to start companies. So actually, I came to the region 6 years ago, and it wasn't that dynamic and that active. And so I'll even complement that further by saying that there's a willingness for people from this region who have had successful entrepreneurship experiences in the more developed VC markets like Europe and the US to come back and start their company here. It's the case of the Karim founders, for example. And so the plus side, I would say the people kind of secret sauce is starting to be good here in the region. On the negative side, it's the lack of exit markets. So there's already lack of exit markets.
Yep.
So there have been a couple of meaningful secondary transactions where people have found liquidity, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's also been some meaningful M&A. That's also a good thing. It's not enough yet. We need more of an exit market before there's truly a real innovation ecosystem here.
Thank you. Sonia?
On the plus side, there's definitely a lot of support from government entities for entrepreneurs these days. There's a lot of, all the way down to the universities, to having entrepreneurships in courses at the university level, to encouraging them to start building companies at that early stage, to accelerators, et cetera. There's lots of support from the government to kind of propel the ecosystem. On the, and that's across the GCC. We see that everywhere. On the negative side, it's regulation between the different countries and expanding to the different countries in the GCC is tough. It's very tough for entrepreneurs to break those barriers, and people, and we find that very difficult with a lot of the companies that we've invested in. So having one go from Dubai to Saudi, it's not easy. Karim is one of the ones that have done it well. But it's not the easiest part for some entrepreneurs to do. So if they make that, if that can become easier, that will be a great plus.
Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you, Dubu.
From my perspective, the biggest plus is it's in the middle of the world. So you can actually work with Asia. You can work with the US. Many years back, I moved back to the UK primarily for that, because sitting in Silicon Valley, you just couldn't work in Asia. At least somebody died in the whole process. So the middle of the world really matters to me because I find it's easier. The other part, when I look at, and I don't think it's a negative, but it's just a lack of local content that always, I always find it bothers me, because I spend a fair bit of time in what is called the poorer part of the Middle East, and I see that constantly out there. I sat on a boat in Palestine, and it's interesting as I see that. So we have a startup out there called Yamsafar, which is actually now fairly heavily in the GCC, and the lack of content sort of benefits it, but often it is what doesn't make any sense, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Well, you've touched upon a couple of ideas that actually is encouraging me to ask about them. You mentioned the support of the government. But is it the role of the government to do that, or it's also the role of the private sector? Why the government needs to support all of these? Anybody? Do you think that the government should support these things, or this is also a responsibility for the private sector?
Private sector.
Excellent. Please.
I think it's a responsibility.
She will give you the microphone. No, I'd love to hear your voice. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I guess it has to be the responsibility of the private sector. The government could put in rules and regulations and support into the regulatory base, but the support has to be a private sector purely.
But why the private sector is not moving enough or clearly so that you and me can see that?
Because they're lazy. They don't want to invent the wheel, and they want to go for a conventional way of investing rather than a new way of investment.
Do you agree that the private sector is lazy here?
Well, but Mohammed, they're not mutually exclusive. They can both help, and in fact they do both help actually. And you know, the way that the government can help is in fact by helping to fuel funds that then invest in innovation. And that's along with regulatory support, which is the main job of a government, is the best way that that the private sector, because VCs are private, and governments can work together in financing the innovation ecosystem, I think. But you know.
So we at VentureSouq represent a bunch of angel investors that come in very early on into companies, in regional companies. These type of investors help fuel the ecosystem very early on, and so that are looking for the great companies, and the good companies will find investment even down to the angel stage. So you don't necessarily need government to come in and support you, because if you're a good company, somebody will fund you, and that's what we tend to see with our angels, because there is.
Thank you. You raise your hand, right? The microphone.
I just said that the support needs to come both from private and governments. Like she said, the regulatory support is very important. And I believe in Bahrain, currently the support is from both the private and from the government.
It's a partnership.
Yes, it's a partnership basically, and they have to collaborate together because they both need each other.
Thank you very much. Now, we see here a young lady from Bahrain, right? Now, in the Arab world, as far as I know, from all the studies that I was like trying to dig and find, 70% of the population are under the age of 30. So they're young people, lots of young people. What is exactly the needs for these? What are the tips that you would like to give to this young generation, the 70% of the population, in order to be on the right track and to find a proper a proper road that they can continue on and grow? Tipu?
So I want to be careful how I answer this one. Choose younger leaders helps. You know, one of the interesting things in the Middle East I find is younger population but relatively older leaders, and sometimes there's a disconnect from a regulatory perspective, which is the point that.
Just keep it close, because I think we need to raise his microphone, please.
So the regulatory coherence is definitely an issue out here, because it could do with a lot of coherence in terms of regulation, because countries are small other than Saudi. So if there was a regulatory coherence and everybody could trade with everybody and have a common standard. But going back to young people is pick stuff that you're really interested in. You know, my generation grew up with parents saying do this, and then you sort of followed that. But picking something that you really care about really helps, because that's how development really happens. One. The other one, which again from a pure tech perspective I'd always say, is just make sure that you're skilling yourself right. Skilling doesn't necessarily mean coding. There's a lot of emphasis on coding that's happened. Some of it is really misplaced, because a lot of the basic coding that's being taught will be done by robots, will be done by machines. None of it's going to be done by humans in even 5 years to 7 years. But picking the right interface between coding and the product management skills, that's valuable. That's something that you can learn and you can do, and which will help. And that's something I see that probably there's not enough focus that's happening, but it's really worthwhile.
Okay, I'll come back to you, but I'll ask now the people here, especially also the young people who are still young. Do you believe that you have the right or the ability to pick? Dibu used pick 4 or 5 times in his statement, the last answer. Do you feel that you are able to pick, or somebody is feeding you with the information or feeding you with even choices? Do you want to answer this? Please.
So I just want to understand the question more.
The question, Dibu was saying that, you know, he is encouraging the young people to pick. Are you able, do you have enough platform to pick your choices, or you are guided based on what your family is guiding you, or the society is guiding you, or the, you know, how much money you have in your pocket? Are you able to pick your choices as young generation in this part of the world?
Choices in terms of a career, you mean?
Career, exactly. Invest, whatever ideas you would like to implement.
Yes, for me, from my personal experience in Bahrain, yes, I do believe that there was a lot of mentorship and awareness about different careers and rising industries. For example, I was introduced to the logistics industry as a rising industry in my school, and I was at public school, and there was a lot of mentorship in that. And currently, the logistics industry is thriving, and there's a lot of female students in it. So for me personally, yes, I found a lot of platforms, and there was a lot of basically awareness and education in Bahrain regarding to new emerging careers and the importance of also women empowerment. So for me personally, yes, I did find some benefits.
Wonder, you're lucky. What tips can you give to this younger generation from your experience? They are 70%, and they are going to be needed also in your businesses.
For a young person starting up a new, let's say, a startup.
Yes.
I would recognize what your skills are, your strengths, and then find a team with opposite strengths. Because as mentioned many times on this panel, most of us look for a strong team first and foremost, because that's what's going to propel your business. That's what's going to keep it going. If your team is strong, they're hardworking, and they work well together. So that's what I would give advice to people. If you're starting out a company, you want to have a strong team that you work well with and has complementary skill sets, so that you can all work towards one direction.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I would like to add on a point. For most of the young people, I think some of them are afraid and apprehensive that if I start my startup, how am I going to compete with someone who has 20 years of experience doing finance? But however, I would like to say that for young people, use your youth as an advantage. You're young, you're creative, you're innovative. You can think of new things that someone in the industry for 20 years can't think about. You bring new things to the industry. So use this advantage and leverage on it.
That's very encouraging. Anybody else before I ask the... okay, do you want to say something, Dave?
Yeah, sure. You know, I think that's a very good point, right? I mean, you should be daring to explore, right? And be creative and break things, right? I think in the same time, you should also invest in yourself, right? You should invest in, building up skill sets and also going in the direction of your passion. Now, one of the best advice I've ever gotten was, when I was doing this startup called Zuora, right? So Zuora is an enterprise SaaS company in the US. And the founder is, used to be the #2 at Salesforce, right? To Mark Benioff, Tin Zuo. So I think the best advice he's ever given is, when you are in a startup, when you are running a startup, whether you are an early employee or you are a co-founder or a founder, the most important thing is always take ownership on things, right? Absolutely. Always, discard the hierarchical nature of an organization where things are top-down, right? Rather, focus on yourself. Think of it like a web, and you being the center of the web. You could be an early employee in a company, and the company might be run by the CEO or co-founder, right? But you should always think of how to get things done and how to push things forward with you being the center of ownership, right? Leadership can come from any position in any organization if it's being interpreted in a different way. So I think that's very important for young people.
If you succeed in your ownership, what you own now, that will make you a leader, right? Alex, but what about the funds? Is it an easy get in this part of the world? What about the funds?
Are the funds easy to get? Well, I mean, everybody is fundraising in the region right now, so the funds are not so easy to get. That's a problem. It's funny because you often hear entrepreneurs complaining about the funding gap, which, as everybody knows, is between, you know, sort of angel or even before angel and Series B, Series C-ish, because there are people like me out in the market saying, well, unless, you know, your product is already on the market and a bunch of people are buying it, you know, it's just not my job to finance you, which happens to be our positioning. And thankfully, there are some people who do that, you know, before, but not enough people. So the funding gap also exists for funds. In fact, funds right now are difficult to get in the region. But it's also part of this evolution of the ecosystem here. I think that's in the process of fixing itself, because we're seeing corporates come into funds. We're seeing governments creating initiatives to, you know, to finance funds, and these are all great things, and can only help the ecosystem develop further in the region in the next, I would say, very few years.
I would agree, because the funding is even difficult at the early stage, because like a Series A here, you tend to have to see quite a lot of traction, because the investors in the region are risk averse in that sense. So idea stage, you never see funding for an idea. So you never see funding for an idea stage company, which you can see in other, like in more developed markets. And even at the Series A, you tend to see quite a lot of traction, because as you mentioned, that people don't want to be funding too early on, saying, you know, I want to see that you actually have completed something and you can actually do something with this business.
Please.
So can I ask, because if it's too early, there are other ways of structuring it. You could do it through a convertible, so you don't have to worry about valuation anymore.
Yeah, no, you can, but even at that point, people want to see traction. Even our angels want to see traction. We as an angel group rarely see companies that don't have revenue getting funding.
But what about you? Anybody like went through an experience that they can share with us about funding, the funding saga, whether it's easy or difficult? Anybody can share this with us? If you don't raise your hand, I'm going to ask you.
Funding.
Yep.
I have only one term.
Funding is difficult. It's not that easy.
Yeah, but have you? Can you share with us one of your like stories how you were able to get it, or otherwise?
No, I'll get you from an accelerator point of view, which we run here in Bahrain. We've got probably in 4 or 5 months 40 startups in our accelerator, and among them probably as seed. I'm talking about pre-seed and seed, not growth. 2 out of 45 got funded. That's it. And the rest are struggling. It is not that easy.
Do you know why?
The appetite, the investors' appetite is in there. The angel investors' network is in there. VC, they wouldn't invest in pre-seed and seed. They will go for more growth. And this is in generality. And then you've got the Bahrain Development Bank, for example, will extend loans rather than equity. But that will go through a very stringent conditions in terms of providing collateral, putting his own home as a collateral, or signing a check that he will be responsible for once the company busted and bankrupted. So all those factors accumulated in the difficulties of raising funds for startups.
So it's getting more difficult, or it used to be easier, or what? Please.
It's getting easier?
I mean, was it easier like 5-6 years ago?
No, there was none 5 years
ago. So there's a progress.
Yeah.
There's a progress,
in a very slow turtle move, yes.
Okay, please.
I'm a corporate VC, and we've done 18 transactions in 4.5 years, which is good, but our process is long. You know, corporate venturing takes their time, and you need to do things more quickly. So I'm part of the delay, but we do have a track record. That being said, you know, to Mohammed's point, the investors are used to real estate and more private equity type investing.
Yep.
And the success stories are coming, okay, and they have come, and there's more investors getting in, but there's still gaps. And then it's a very conservative, kind of risk-averse take your time culture here. I heard a horror story from one of the entrepreneurs pitching or here saying, no, I don't know the name, but they said we had commitments from 2 investors, term sheets, we restructured the organization, and then they walked away. And I'm like, oh, it's hard, but it's not impossible, and the success stories are going to make it easier.
All right. Yeah. The gentleman over there, please.
Actually, I have personal experience here in the local market in Bahrain.
Please.
I'm glad that I'm here in Bahrain, that if we set up a company here, we get a grant. We are not in need of a funding, actually. If you visit www.temkin.bh, if you have a CR, if you have a commercial license here, you can get easily grants here. So I can guarantee you it's easily, if you need like $50,000 or even $100,000, you can get it as a grant.
And you've already experienced that yourself?
I have a couple of small startups, and I applied through Temkin, and my business get enabled, and I've done a good success in my business.
Wonderful, wonderful. Anything to contribute, please?
Just to add something. So this is kind of a gap, especially at the angel stage, that VentureSouk has noticed quite early on, that there are angels out there. There's pools of capital, but there's a lack of education at angel stage. So you'll still have people just don't understand how to invest into tech companies. They don't understand what a convertible note is. They don't understand how to value a company, and what to look for. So we try to educate the angels to try and help build that ecosystem and build that network to help early stage companies.
Do you think locally every government or every NGO's group of investors should have a body that their role is to educate these startups before they approach, or is it the role of the private sector?
We educate the investors, not the startups. We look for the investors and say, look, these are the types of companies you should be looking for, not educating the startups.
Does that mean that the investors, when they come to the region, they don't do their homework before coming here?
No, the investors, these are angels in the region.
From within, okay.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. Okay, please, Alex.
Yeah, if you allow me a quick story about the funding gap that puts this problem into perspective. I'll make it very quick, but some time ago we looked at quite a young company which was selling a solution to make electronic tags for the retail sector. It was one of the very early applications of RFID technology. This is already quite some time ago now. And these guys had an almost deal with a very major distributor. We wouldn't invest because the deal wasn't signed, right? Typical problem. So what these guys did very cleverly is that they went to their client and they said, look, we want to give you the solution. We can't get financing. Will you finance us? And so they negotiated basically an advance payment on a licensing deal, which in fact took value away from the company. In a way, it reduced the value in that deal because, of course, the retailer wanted to be paid for effectively financing the startup. They came back to us and they said, well, how about this? Should we do this? And we said, no, you don't want to do that. We'll finance you. So there are ways in which entrepreneurs can pull the VC a little bit further down by kind of cleverly finding alternatives to VCs. Then we're keen to invest.
Well, I think that's a good opportunity to have a chat with Alex, and he can give you some tips how to handle that. Please, there's microphone. You want to say something? Sorry, I'll come back to you. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to know how do we ensure as a startup that the investors' vision aligns with ours?
That they are aligned with you? Is that what you said?
Investors, if we're as a startup and we are looking for investors and someone want to invest in our company, in our startup, how we do ensure that they align with us?
Maybe I'll jump in to answer this question. Please. I think one way in which you can do so is to talk to the investors' portfolio companies. Talk to them, find out from the other portfolio companies that they have invested in what their working style is like, what their interest in like. So that is when you will hear firsthand of how the investor really works, as compared to maybe just a website on the investor's page, which doesn't really give you first-hand insights into how the investor works. And also read up more about the investor, read up more about the firm, read up more about the partners, see where their background comes from.
When you're dealing with angels, it's trickier because they don't have a website, and this is where you need to go and do personal due diligence. Generally, the markets, once they get to a particular size, you can figure out, you can talk to other people and get a sense. So it's always trickier with angels to do this, but angel syndicates typically tend to cover this kind of stuff. But there's enough that you can talk in the market and find out. What you really want to focus on is two things. One is, are they anything more than capital? And there's nothing wrong with pure capital. Okay, it's just got a price to it. And if they're adding anything more beyond capital, exactly what do they add? That's the other thing that you want to figure out.
Anybody else before we move?
I guess all that is true, and I agree very, very, very much with what was said. The only thing I would add is that you have to like the person. I mean, this is something like something like a long-term relationship that you're starting with an investor who's going to be around your company for 5 years, 10 years. You have to get along with that person. You have to have a good feeling about them.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you for coming back to me, but I wanted to just make a comment on the easiness of getting the fund.
Okay.
And since I'm from Saudi, so I came all the way from Saudi. And I know, and I'm certain that the government now is having more interest on funding and securing more the startups into and pushing them into the startup kind of ecosystem. I'm not sure if you heard about the fund of the fund. And it's, I think, if I'm not sure, it's 100 billion.
Can you just put the microphone closer?
Yeah, it's 100 billion Saudi riyal.
Yes.
And it will be responsible for funding other entities, and it's a government. It's a government, let's say, a powerhouse to support the whole ecosystem. Now, in terms of funding. And plus, even the private sector, banks and others, are getting more in line with the government to make the ecosystem more appealing. And that's all. That's about Saudi, by the way.
Are you referring the one that was the announcement during MISC conference, right? End of last year.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Now, I think we're about to close. I will give the last chance very quickly, please. If you can predict, hypothetically, 2030, do you think that there will be some really businesses that we're talking and innovation that we have here that we will be sending to the West, but really started here, grow here, and went out instead of the other way around? Can you predict, or do you have any hypothetical ideas that can be implemented? Dave?
So you're talking about going to external market?
Exactly. Is there anything that you think that can start from here and go out instead of the other way around in the coming 10 years or so?
I would say, that's going to depends on a lot of factors, actually.
Yep.
Not every single market works that way. Some ecosystem that we've seen inherently has the kind of talent and that's talent and technical expertise to allow for that to happen.
Yep.
While some other markets are not, right? Some other markets are more suited for investment to happen within the region and essentially to focus on the region itself, right? So let me just give a few examples. For example,
briefly, please,
yeah,
because we don't have time.
Yeah. So for example, India, Southeast Asia, largely are still a very regionally domestic-driven market. So you see a lot of investment, a lot of companies essentially trying to create a solution that tackles a large market problem, right? It doesn't mean that these kind of startups are not appealing to investors. They are, right? By the end of the day, I mean, we are looking for a return besides looking to help entrepreneurs to be successful. And you know, to get to the route that you described, right, really requires a lot of inherent capability to export, right? So I think Israel, for example, is a good example where, you know, within a very small country, you have a lot of deep tech that's going on, and it is essentially created to go outward, right? So it really depends on the market dynamics. Yeah.
Okay, Alex, anything?
Well, I think I'd rather stay true to my opening statement and say that one has to be opportunist. I mean, I think the answer is yes, there will be innovation from this region that will be exported to other parts of the world. There's absolutely no reason why not.
Like what?
Well, this is what I don't want to answer, right? Because I mean, I think that there are national specificities that make it, you know, such that America is really good at large consumer plays, and some European countries are really good at microelectronics, and there are, let's say, cultural reasons for that. Okay. And I think that this region will produce, you know, something that is true to this region. But, you know, it's going to be chance, and it's going to be opportunist. It is going to be luck, and I'm hoping that I can finance those companies, but I don't know what they're going to be.
Prepared for that. Yes, please, Sonia.
I think I agree. It's hard to determine what technology will be the dominant one or the exciting one in the next 10 years, because 10 years ago I couldn't predict what's happening now. But
especially the technology is really changing every minute.
And it's leapfrog. It's exponentially different from what it was 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But what I do hope to see in the region is just building and creating and reading more engineers, like local engineers, to help create that innovation come from the region.
Yeah, for myself, I agree with them. So 10 years time, and compared to the rate at which things are moving so quickly nowadays, it's very difficult to predict what exactly it is. But I believe that it will something be along the lines of technology. That's how the world is advancing. And in terms of the potential of this region from being the one that ends up distributing this technology across the world, I would say yes, it's definitely a high possibility.
If I break up the world of startups into product startups and execution startups, the two greatest product startups that have come out in the last 10 years, 15 years, I would say is Google and M-Pesa.
Yes.
Now, who would have thought a company coming out of Kenya, in effect, would be the top two in the world in terms of what it has done? And it's done out of using basic mobile phones. So the broader point I'm trying to make is that you don't have to export something out to always be a success. You can be a success if you are good in what you do in your own field. If I had to pick one space by 2030, I'd probably say IoT in the real estate space, because there's enough of real estate in the Middle East to make it worthwhile. And IoT within that is a very specific space, especially on door and window sensors, which is very specific technology sitting inside that. I could see that because the use cases are there, and this is a country, and especially in countries like Saudi, you can experiment on different models that would work.
Thank you very much. Well, I know that you have lots of ideas and questions to ask the speakers, but they're going to be around, and you will be able to talk to them and spend some more time with them. So thank you very much, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you so much. This session will be available on YouTube after today. So if you want to revisit anything, then just check the Unbound Global YouTube channel. As I'm sure you can hear, the drag races are revving up and ready to go. The drag race officially begins at 6 p.m. Over on the grandstand just here, the other side of registration. There are also some shuttles there that will take you to a barbecue for delegates, which is set a little bit back from the drag race so that you're not deafened. But there will be shuttles between both locations. So please enjoy yourselves, and we'll see you back here tomorrow where main stage begins at 10. Thanks very much to the investors, VCs, and to Caroline from CNN. Thank you.